Hello, friends! How are you all doing today? And Dirg, how are you?
I'm good. How are you
That
doing
is-
today?
I'm doing fantastic. Today we are talking about community management. And, well,
Fun stuff.
yep, I've been in the for anyone who doesn't know, I'm Jade the Kobold. I've been in the games industry for the past 9 now? 8? I've been in the games industry for a while, and worked as an actor before that. And it's important to have a good community. Dirg, you are an expert in this field. Tell us about yourself.
Hello, I'm Connor. I moderate quite a few servers, from smaller ones, growing pretty fast though, like yours, to bigger ones with like Wholesome Memes with over 10,000 members. I'm currently in college studying cybersecurity.
Awesome. That is actually very relevant, right? Cybersecurity is a very relevant field.
Indeed.
All right.
Hacker Derg.
Hacker Dirg, indeed. So, we're going to be covering a bunch of different sides of this. We're not going to be talking about how to grow your community. That's on you, right? But this is going to be more on how to keep your community good, clean, positive, and focused in a sense, right? And combining both what we've done with our server with what we know with what we've seen on other larger servers, and talking about a couple different styles. Where do we want to start out? So, first of all, a very large server like Wholesome Memes, or if you if you own BioWare or something like if you're a community manager at a major press corporation, that's going to have a different set of standards and rules. And I think rules is a good place to start, because that's the first thing that people see and usually are required to see as soon as they get into your community. How do you feel about rules?
A good set of rules is very, very important, and it really depends on the community that you're making rules for, what rules you should make, how strict they should be. All these things you got to decide to make your server more effective.
And how specific they should be, right?
True.
I actually haven't looked at Wholesome Memes rules in a hot minute. What do you feel makes a good rule set? Like, what are some of the keystones that you should have?
Set. Well, first there's, just the more general ones. Very, basic. It could be as simple as don't be rude to as, specific as certain things that are allowed or not allowed. And, there's a lot of, certain servers require more moderation in certain things.
Right.
Like lot of, a big thing is, for example, in a larger server like Wholesome Memes, there's a lot of like LGBT people. So like any homophobia or transphobia or anything like that, instant ban. There's very strict on certain things like that, and it definitely varies server to server.
What if they're just asking questions?
Well, that's a tough situation.
It is, but that is a very common tactic that you see from people nowadays who are trying to troll is, oh, I'm not saying blank, I'm just asking what if X, Y, Z, and it's like you are asking in a very leading way. How do you personally deal with those situations?
Well, it definitely varies server to server. Like, Wholesome Memes, we definitely err on the side of this guy's a troll, get him out of here. But then on a server like yours, we usually err on the side of, maybe this guy is just confused and maybe they were raised to think things and it's not their
Mhm.
fault, maybe.
And sometimes that is true. Sometimes, somebody will say something and then be like, oh, wait, I guess that's not cool. Because everybody comes from a different community and a different background, right? That is a perfectly reasonable...
Hmm.
It can be a perfectly reasonable reaction. It can also be a smokescreen to get yourself to be allowed to say the thing that you're not allowed to say. But it can be difficult
And the big
to...
thing is,
Mhm. Go
it's
ahead.
much easier to tell if you give them the benefit of the doubt the first time and then they do it again.
That's fair. Yeah. Hmm.
That makes it much easier to tell.
Now, how do you feel about reactive rule setting?
Reactive rule setting?
That is to say, as soon as somebody does something bad, you create a rule for it, and then every time that something bad happens, you set a rule for for going forward. Sort of like what you see now in the modern Western world, where all of a sudden you have warning labels because someone did a thing. That sort of idea, except
Yeah.
in the sense of a server or in the sense of a forum.
Well, it definitely has its pros and cons. I mean, there's always those people that are just like, oh, this isn't a rule, when it should just be common sense. Like,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
you know. And then, there's some servers where you do actually have to put it. Sometimes, if a rule is, I don't know, really specific or something like that, or something that varies from place to place, then you'd want to have it if it's one of those gray areas.
Such as what? Do you have an example on that one? I'm curious.
Um, I guess one example. Now I think off the top of my head, one example I guess would be like something like trigger warnings,
Okay,
where if you
that's
have
fair.
a community where a lot of people can have very uh, big reactions to something, very bad
Mm-hmm.
reactions to something, then you'd want to have that as a rule. But then if you have like,
Something like
say,
tryptophobia or arachnophobia.
yep, or versus say you have like a group of friends who all know each other and know, that kind of thing.
You might not need the arachnophobia content warning on Spider Lovers Anonymous forums.
Yep.
Phantos says, what exactly is common sense? And that's a fair question. And yes, this is an open discourse with chat. If you guys want to ask questions, feel free to chime in. We have a bunch of stuff and topics we want to cover, but this is also, a conversation with you guys as well. I know we have a lot of
Hi, chat people.
developers in chat as well, as usual, so. And VTubers in chat as well, is pretty common, and VTuber communities follow many of the similar setup issues and hurdles as small game dev studios. Mm-hmm.
Honestly, I could see a game dev studio and the VTuber and all them. Like, honestly, I could see them having a pretty similar community.
Yeah. I mean, mine in specific has
Especially,
massive overlap.
yeah, especially when you have a community. You got like a VTuber, a YouTuber that does game dev stuff.
So what are your thoughts on common sense? Let's cover that one first.
Common sense.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
it's a loaded question, right? Like,
it is very much a loaded question.
Because we kind of covered that, at least in part, when we were talking about how different rules fit for different people, right? For different groups.
Mm-hmm.
But is there something that you can consider common sense in a meaningful way? Right? Is there a meaningful definition of common sense for you?
I guess you kind of gotta, at least like when you're moderating a server, making a server, you got to assume that most people just don't have common sense.
Fair.
There's some things that should be assumed, like racism.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's common sense. That kind of thing. Like all the
I would say extrapolate from that anything that trivializes a minority.
Yeah, pretty much. Like any of that, any like homophobia, transphobia, all the phobias.
Startup phobia, yeah. And that can be very difficult to deal with in a gaming community, right? Because of the volume of vitriol that can be directed in-game will get channeled into your community.
Yep.
If you have a PvP game, then you will have people who are going to yell at their opponents. If you have a co-op game with PvP, then you have people who are going to yell at their teammates.
Any server with PvP is going to have some problems with anger and fighting, and that's another thing. You got to know how to deal with conflict within the server. Sometimes you got arguments can get out of hand, and
how do you
got to
sniff
know
that out?
like. Well, lots of times it's pretty obvious by the amount of caps locking in the chat. Sometimes, especially on like larger servers, I'll have people come to me and be like, "Hey, this conversation's making me uncomfortable," or "Hey, there's a fight going on," and then you got to know like sometimes we'll mute them and go to like a muted channel where like only people who are muted can see it, and be like, "Okay, we got to settle this," or sometimes we'll just even be like, "All right, just take it to DMs, get it out of the server." It all depends on how involved we want to be with the argument, how serious the argument is, if it affects the server, that type of thing.
Sapphire asked a very good question. She asked two questions, but I want to focus on one that's relevant to what we're talking about now. How do you sniff out an argument made in jest from an actual argument? And follow up to that, I think, would be naturally to say, is there a meaningful difference from an argument made in jest to an actual argument?
Well, I guess the main thing is when you step in and be like, "Hey, calm down," and then everyone immediately calms down and be like, "Oh, it's just a joke." It's like, "Oh, okay, cool, it's just a joke."
Okay.
And that's a pretty easy way to tell right there.
So when the mods show up...
When the mods show up. Does the argument keep going, or does everyone run away?
Okay. That's fair. I think that's a fair point to say, though, is that an argument made in jest from one party might not be seen as jest from the other half.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
And an argument made in jest can still have negative effects, the same exact negative effects as an argument, like a real argument. Especially if it is hard to tell.
So how do you err on those situations?
Well, I mean, when it originally happens, usually I'll start off with, the same way. Just try to de-escalate, calm down, and at that point you don't really have to worry about erring in either way, because it shows itself pretty quickly there.
It shows itself pretty quickly there. Can you elaborate on that?
Like when you try to de-escalate it, if it's an argument made in jest, people usually will back down, be like, "All right, yeah."
Okay. So it's a question of how defensive people are. It's really kind of what you're coming down to, is how defensive people get about that.
Pretty much. And then also sometimes there's actual arguments that de-escalate very quickly when you step in, and honestly, dealing with it the same way as an argument made in jest usually works, as long as it doesn't end up with hard feelings or something like that.
The hard feelings actually raises a question that I've been thinking about, and that is, how much do you have to pay attention to feelings? Because is there a threshold line where paying attention to people's feelings is no longer important to for keeping the integrity of a server, especially in a larger server, like in a server like mine, on a smaller scale, we care about every individual, sometimes to a fault in some cases, but in a larger scale server, how much are you allowed to care about the people's feelings?
Honestly, I would say the larger the server, the less you care. Like,
Mm-hmm.
because in a larger server, when you can have, a group of people coming in, or even this one time I had 300 bot accounts come in,
Mm-hmm.
and you can't spend the time with 300 bot accounts and be like, hey, what's going on? You gotta just
Mm-hmm.
get them out as soon as you can, because they're just causing chaos and not being
Right.
good. But
Now,
then,
do you?
the smaller the server, like yours, would be, definitely, I don't think we've had a single one that we didn't take aside and talk to before banning on your server.
There was one. There was one where it was we yeeted them, but right, I did actually. But yeah, we got this. It's uncommon in a smaller server, but
Mm-hmm.
do you
I think
clean
that one
sweep?
was just a very extreme case, though.
Oh, yeah, it was obvious. It was very obvious.
Yeah.
And that's actually something I wanted to bring up here is knowing red flags and knowing dog whistles. Because the reason I knew that there was not going to be any... I almost said rehabilitation, but that's not quite what I'm looking for. It's not entirely wrong,
All right.
though.
Send them off to rehab.
Server rehab. But one of the reasons I knew that there was no redemption, there was no talking to them, was because I saw certain dog whistles that I recognized, and I knew what they meant, and I knew what culture they were coming from, right? I saw some dark side of older 4chan references, like, okay, this would be considered fairly innocuous if I didn't know the context behind that. This is a dog whistle that only people who recognize that context will get. Because I'm conscious of what that means, I can make a more informed decision.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I would say this kind of loops back to the common sense one where, the what I said earlier with what you should assume would be common sense, the more extreme things.
mm-hmm.
I would say, any of that big red flag, you're probably not going to be able to redeem themselves. If it's like, another thing we talked about earlier with the questioning, like a kind of like a loaded question, like that's very iffy. It depends on the context, depends on the wording, all that.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's sometimes where it's just, I don't even know how to describe it, just the vibe.
How do you fish out a vibe? Actually, before I ask that, let me ask you something else. When you have a large raid, like you had before, we were saying you had 300 bot accounts come in, did you clean sweep everybody who came in at that time period? Or did you wait for something to happen? Because they both are different styles of moderation. Someone might say, okay, things are going down, we need to hunker down and clean sweep and wipe out every account that came in from this hour to this hour because we got raided by several hundred bots. But you also don't know if is it okay to say, well, maybe we kicked a few people who we shouldn't have at that point. Maybe someone came in at that time.
This one was pretty obvious because we had like 300 accounts all come in the span of a few seconds.
Oh, well, in that case, yeah.
And yeah, that was pretty easy to tell. I mean, there is always the off chance that some random person just happened to join in that few second period. Mm-hmm. And, the larger the raid, the longer that time frame is going to be.
Yeah. I was,
yeah. if you have like 1,000 accounts come in a period of like an hour and they all start spamming some terrible, terrible things, then,
I was
you
in
know,
a server that has how many? A couple hundred people, I want to say, several hundred. And at one point, yeah, like about 700 or so. And at one point, like about 50 accounts came in over the course of an hour, right? So it was definitely a concerted effort of trolls, definitely a combined attack. And that was when I joined the server. Completely randomly. I joined within that hour.
oh no.
So my account was flagged and muted upon entry, and I didn't know why.
I guess one thing that would help with that is the ability to send a moderator DM like, hey, I'm not with them, I just happen to come in at the same time.
I think that's fair, and the part of what I want to bring about that is that I was muted, not kicked or banned automatically. So that was a difference. I think that the mute tool is very effective.
It is. In that scenario, the only reason we went to ban was because they started spamming. But the thing is, they were you know the things that keep going around where it's like some random account just sends you a DM, and then if you click the link and log in, it'll steal your account. It was those, and they were spamming people's DMs, which is why we got to get them out of here as soon as possible. Muting wouldn't help in that situation.
Absolutely, muting doesn't help that.
And again, they all came in the span of a few seconds, so it was pretty obvious to tell who were the bot accounts.
Mm-hmm.
And then we just got floods of reports like, hey, this account is DMing me scam links, this account is doing this, that, like, we actually one recent change we made was we added in a ticket system.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
that comes standard on most forums, but on most chat rooms it doesn't.
I personally really like it. Currently there's 2 servers that I moderate that have it, and honestly, it's very effective because, in a situation where you need to report something, your option is either to start pinging mods, which, it can get complicated where it's like, oh, I don't like this person, ping at moderator, But, with the ticket system, all the moderators can see it, but it doesn't, ping them because there's some people who are very against pinging.
Yeah.
I personally I don't mind pinging. I don't mind DMing. You can ping me or DM me anytime you want. But then aren't you you're the opposite though, right? Where if you're sleeping and someone pings you, it'll wake you up or something, right?
I have several people in my life who I care about who, the only emergency contact they have for me would be either a text message or a Discord ping. So I usually leave myself open to that so that I am available at those hours. I don't want to be woken up by a, hey, look at this funny cat, but I want to also make myself available. And there's no distinction between ping and emergency ping, right? And same with most forums. You either get a DM or you don't get a DM. You don't actually have any sort of well, I guess if you have a ticket system, you could set it so that an urgent ticket would ping and a regular ticket would not. I guess there is a distinction to be made there. But
with an urgent ticket, that's when you get in the ticket and then you ping that moderator. Yeah, that would be something, something urgent, got someone spamming. Probably the worst thing I've seen was when we had a raid in, it was actually in a Terraria mod Discord server, probably about 3,000 members.
Okay.
And these
size.
bot accounts came in, started spamming really bad gore in all channels. And that was very not good.
Yeah.
Especially for, a server for, this loops back to
Kids.
game dev. Yeah, for kids. I mean, it's for a Terraria mod. Like, there's
Gonna be
going
a
to be
lot of
kids on
minors.
there. Yeah. Hopefully, no one under 13, because that breaks terms of service.
But it's the internet, so you have to kind of
But
have
it's
to
the
assume.
internet,
You have to
so
assume, and that again, goes back into
it's going to
forums as
happen.
well. Yeah, people are going to people of various sizes are going to find and are going to click that they're over 13 slash 18 slash whatever your server is set for, or whatever your forum is set for. There's no
Yeah,
real meaningful way of preventing that, right?
and then you got some kids that go on and it's like, oh, are you over 18 into your birthday? And then they put, I was born in, 1800s.
Mm-hmm. I mean,
Well, I was born 1,000 years ago. Am I old enough?
and sometimes I'll admit that I've clicked that I've clicked that just because it was faster and I didn't feel like hunting out my exact, date out of a drop-down list that was not scrolling effectively. So it's like, if whatever, yeah, I was born in the 60s, sure, why not? Like, I've done that myself just because I didn't care to take the effort to it, which is different than intentionally making, masking it, right? Yeah, and 1st of January, everyone's born on the 1st of January, obviously.
Uh-huh.
That's
Yeah,
that's
fun
just
fact
normal.
for you.
That's just a fact. That's
My
not a good
Steam
indicator of
account,
somebody lying, is what I'm saying.
yeah, fun fact for you, my Steam account has the wrong birthday because when I initially created it, I lied about my age. And I just haven't bothered to change it.
Fair. I mean,
So, in my Steam account says I was born a few years before I actually was. And I have no idea if the actual account says it, but that's how it thinks I am.
but it's still something you need to be cognizant of, right? Like you said with the Terraria server, like, oh yeah, it's Discord. You have to be 13 years to be, of age to be here. But it's like, yeah, but that's not how it pans out in real life, right? That's not a realistic measurement unless you're checking people's IDs. And I've been in servers where they have actually asked for IDs if you want to enter certain content areas, and like, a lot of people are going to decline that, but in a smaller server,
Yeah.
you could do that. Or if it's a server where it's extremely important that you have that validation, you could do that, but, for legal purposes. But, like, by and large, you are not necessarily going to be held responsible, even as a moderator, even as a server owner, for somebody else lying about their age.
Mm-hmm.
You just need to be conscious that it happens, yeah?
But the thing is, though, if you do actually learn of someone who's underage, then it becomes your responsibility. And there've been servers that just get completely shut down because they had a minor in it. It's happens all the time.
Yeah.
And we've had that happen. Or well, the server didn't get shut down, but we have had to ban someone due to age.
Mm-hmm. That can happen,
and as sad as it is, and as you can get a really mature 12-year-old versus a really immature 13-year-old, and you have to get rid of the 12-year-old and keep the 13-year-old.
Yeah.
But like,
though to be fair, the mature 12-year-old is might be mature enough to not say that they're 12.
Yep, and that loops back to the you can never know for sure.
Yep. And that you're not responsible for until you are. Until suddenly you are.
Until suddenly you are.
Yeah.
And you always gotta assume on the young side. You definitely don't want some little kid walking into some 18+ area.
Now, what is your opinion of off-topic channels on a targeted server? Now, this is less of a question for my server, which is intentionally untargeted and more just, a place for memes and hanging out. But if you have a server that's about, let's say, Terraria, do you want to have an off-topic where people can talk about other stuff, food, current events, and should that be encouraged or discouraged in your opinion? Because on one hand, you want to build community, right? You want people to feel at home and comfortable talking about whatever, because then they're going to be more likely to stay. On the other hand, that does, by its very nature, dilute the focus of the server.
Well, that's actually very relevant for the Terraria server because we literally have a channel called Off Topic.
Mm-hmm.
And I am, my opinion is I think it should be there, but I think it should just be one channel, one channel, one or two channels depending on the server. And sometimes servers like to split up channels, like this is the text only channel, this is the image only channel, and
Yeah.
if you have something like that, then you'd want to have a few off topics. But it really does, because a lot of times, in that channel, we'll just be talking about random things, and it really does help with your sense of community. It, brings people together, helps you, and, you wouldn't get that if it's like, this is a Terraria mod server, you must talk about this specific mod in this specific game and nothing else.
Are there times where that's a good thing, though? Are there times where you would double back on that and say, well, we want to keep things focused? Is there, the question is, I guess I'm saying is how much value is there in focus, if any? Because
I'd say if it's like a server for a business, a server for like some kind of like support for it, like say it's not a server for your game, but it's a server for like say tech support for your game or something like that, something very specific like that, something a professional environment. Then a off-topic channel would subtract from the the professionalism. It would make it be like, oh yeah, let's go hang out in the tech support server, and that doesn't work as well as, hey, let's go chat in the Terraria server or something, because that's where you want to have a sense of community. You want to make friends there, you can play together and that kind of stuff.
Is it a question of size then? If you're big enough that you don't need to have as much a sense of community? Because if we're talking about game development, I don't know outside of the AAA space that's not necessarily going to be not likely to hit that threshold on a non-AAA budget, right? Most game servers...
I'd say I don't think that's really based on size. I'd say that's definitely based on professionalism of it. Like, not a server I moderate, but for example, I'm in a Discord server for a Minecraft server hosting site, and like that's a place where, well, it's not just a server hosting site, and you would want that one to stay more professional because it is like, you're using our service, you're paying for our service, you come here for support. It's not like that kind of place. I'd say you wouldn't want an off-topic channel. But if it's a server for, say like your server with like a general channel for just regular talking, doesn't have to, you come on your server, you don't have to, everything has to be about Jade,
Right. The funny thing is, my server is the only server I'm in that I actually read general chat. Seriously, across all the servers that I'm in, mine is the only one where I actually read general chat. I always go...
The only servers I read general chat are the ones that I moderate.
Fair. But that's me, that's not necessarily most people. But I do want to
honestly, I think it's overwhelming. If you got like a lot of servers, like, I'm in a lot of servers, a lot of... I think, I don't know exactly how many it is, but it's over 100. And I can't keep up with general chat on all of those. To be fair, most of them, a very large portion of them are for purely for emojis, or like purely so that I can get pinged in the announcement channel or something like that.
But on the same topic, though, how do you feel about vent channels? Vent/serious/ what are the other names for them?
Finally getting to Sapphire's question from forever ago.
Complaining channels.
On
one hand, you have all of those in one space. On the other hand, that's the easiest sort of place to get out of hand, right? That's the easiest sort of place where you need the tightest moderation, and it's also going to be the hardest to moderate because a lot of people are talking about personal feelings.
And then there's a lot of things like, that would normally be against the rules. For example, in your server, you got the no politics rule. If we added a vent channel, I highly doubt you could keep it. You could keep it no politics without just being like no vent channel. And overall, it's from a moderation standpoint, it's very difficult. Like just deciding whether or not it should be there, and then once it is there, you're correct. It is a lot of work to moderate.
The question is, do you think it's worth moderating? Do you think it's worth it having there?
Depends on the community. It depends on how it's I don't know the word. Like if you look at Wholesome Memes, how there's a there's the channel for not for venting, but to like a kind of like a support, like non-professional, if you just want to talk to people about your problems, that kind of thing. And at one point it was completely overrun with venting, and a lot of people were having problems with that because it's like, I'm having a lot of problems in my life, I want to go talk to that channel, I want to talk to people about it. But then you go in there and then you just see this person's giant wall of text complaining about something, and it's like, it kind of dissuades you, especially if you're already in a bad mood, in a bad mindset going in.
So I don't want to focus too much on my server, but I will say that what we did is we have an advice channel, and it's specifically framed that it's, you go there if you have a question and you're looking for advice, not just a trauma dump, right? If you're trauma dumping,
really like that.
Yeah, and so we still have a space for that, a space where people can, ask questions that are more difficult and be like, hey, I need some help with this, which is productive vent, right? It's a productive, serious channel with that has yet, frankly, to degrade into trauma dumping, right? Because that's really what you want to avoid. You want to avoid trauma dumping channels because that simultaneously makes everybody sad except the person who's getting it off their chest, and the person who gets it off their chest is one person, and I hate to say it, but there's more the goods of the many,
Yeah, that's the thing with moderating, is it's really about, what's for the good of the server as a whole, as opposed to this one individual. I'll say, if you want to do that, DM me.
Yep.
Don't put it in the server.
Yeah.
My DMs are always open for anything, anytime. I'm probably opening the floodgates to something that, I'm probably opening the floodgates here, but yeah.
So actually that goes nicely into one of the other topics I wanted to discuss, which is mod visibility. The idea of mods being available to talk to anybody versus being the hand of God, right?
I'm translucent.
Translucent. There are very different moderation styles involved here, and I mean, a long chunk of my internet lifespan was spent on the Something Awful forums, where sassing a mod is literally a bannable offense. Like, the mods do in fact sit on their golden thrones on an ivory tower.
Oh boy.
Whereas in other servers, the mods are hidden. Where the mods are not even easily distinguishable, but they are present.
There's certainly a range. I mean, you got like your server where you see a mod, you don't think, oh, that's a mod, that's some authority figure in the server. It's like, oh, that's just a friend, it's just someone to talk to, it's just a regular person.
Right.
And then there's ones where it's like, if you even dare to talk to this person, you will be banned on site. And it's like, wow, that's a bit excessive.
I think we can talk about pros and cons of each of those settings. I know also, as you know, I have a long background in convention work. And conventions do the same thing. I have run various conventions that have done this in different ways. I'll name names. Otakon has plainclothes security in the dealer's room. If somebody steals in the dealer's room, then somebody who is just wearing a polo shirt and khakis is going to walk up to you and say, "Hey, come over here. We need to talk to you." And you'll be pulled aside. That's how it's handled at Disney World, too. It's nothing bad happens at Disney World because if something bad happens, it's taken off of the main public street very quickly. You don't see the security guards at Disney World. That doesn't mean they're not there.
Imagine you're doing something bad at Disney World and you just get tackled by Mickey Mouse.
And then on the other side of the spectrum, you have something like Anime Central, where you have the security is literally called the Incident Response Team, and they're all wearing tactical vests. They're extremely visible.
Oh, there's certainly pros and cons to each. You know, you got the
yeah. Where do we want to start?
plainclothes ones. I'd say probably, good for avoiding a big scene. But then you got like the ones like the uniforms are definitely, they got that intimidation factor. You don't want to do something bad because you see all these guards around.
The illusion of safety sort of thing. But that also makes some people uncomfortable because, oh, there's people watching us, right? That can be uncomfortable for several people.
Correct.
So, which side do you want to talk about first? Let's deep dive into each of these.
Ooh, deep dive. Oh, you pick.
Let's talk about these super visible mods. Something like Something Awful, or Anime Central, or Blizzard, where the mods all have, where every time a mod types something, it's in a completely different font color than anybody else who's posting. Like that's another example of super visible mods. In that situation, you have a distinction between who is a moderator and who is not. And
the YouTube chat with the blue wrench.
Yeah, that's another super visible mod. Yeah, the YouTube chat with a blue wrench. I mean, if I could hide that, I would, because that's not my moderation style. But regardless, the question here more being like pros and cons of that.
And
I have my thoughts, but I want to hear yours first.
Well, let's see. Pros, we already talked about the intimidation factor, which is also a con, but makes it so people don't want to do things. I guess a con would also be, you walk into a place and it's like, oh, I don't see any of the super visible security here. I don't see, I see 0 mods online listed on the chat. I see no blue wrenches. Like, I'm going to do something bad now. This is where I should do it.
Well, to be fair, on YouTube, there's always one blue wrench because the streamer themselves has mod control, but yeah.
True.
But that's a fair point, though, and that's also true at something like Anime Central, where you can look around and say, I don't see anybody in tactical vest, therefore nobody's looking at me, therefore I can try to steal something and I might get away with it because I can tell that there's nobody there. Whereas at Disney World, you know that somebody's watching, which is a different type of dystopia. But
Mickey Mouse is always watching.
It's true, though.
Soon he will control everything.
Bold of you to assume he doesn't already.
Is Mickey your boss?
I mean, Mickey's all of our bosses if you think about it. If you go deep enough into any content creator. Mouse Panopticon.
I mean, isn't Disney one of the places that popularized that mascot style that you use?
Yeah, true. Although I will actually, I'm actually gonna say that Mouse Panopticon is actually completely true in on the far end of the spectrum, and we will talk about that. The idea that because you don't know where any of the mods are, you simultaneously feel more comforted because you don't have an authority figure staring directly at your face, and more nervous because anybody could be a mod. Like that's something that I do want to discuss when we get to that. But I want to let's focus on the more. Do I want to call it this more authoritarian style, because it is, frankly, but I don't know if that's a good way of phrasing it. But having the mods, super visible, unique text also gives them a hand of God sort of feeling, right? If the mods are super visible, and Blizzard forums is a really good example of this. Anytime a mod posts something, then everybody pays attention to it and says, "Oh, a mod posted this. Look at that." And that becomes super relevant, which means that the mods can't post casually, right? In that situation,
that definitely does take away from that aspect of it. It's much harder for a mod to just go in and be like, "Hey guys, how's it going?"
Right, because the mod can't be a part of the community. Going back to convention work, I've had several situations where I would literally, the security team would call me, who was not on security, who was on a different department, because they knew me and they could trust me, and they were like, "Hey, we need you to talk to somebody who is not responding to authority," because everybody on their team was required to wear these tactical vests at all time. So they needed someone who on staff who was plain clothes, because there were people who would not respond at all to those figures.
The tactical vest isn't working. Send in the tactical kobold.
Pretty much, yeah. Because I was almost always in cosplay while on staff, and then I was just one of the. I felt like one of the congoers. It was, a hello friend, as opposed to, "Hey, what you doing?" So when someone emotionally shuts down, that works. I think that point can be pulled directly out of the convention and directly into the forums, is if you do find it valuable to have the Hand of God mod, if you do want to have the something awful / Blizzard style where the moderation staff isn't necessarily part of the team, then either the mods should have their own alt accounts where they can just talk like quote unquote normal people, or they you need to have people that you can go to who are able to fill that role, but without the blue wrench by their name, without the the blue text on everything they type, without the tack vest on, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So
honestly, I'd say, say my preference is I kind of like it when it's like semi-hidden. Like, there's no big like, this person's a mod, this is mods online, but then it's just like a little thing, like you can tell somebody's a mod, but there's no big flashing bells and whistles and all that. Just in case someone does need to be like, "Hey, something's going down, who do I get in here to help?"
Yeah, who should I contact? That's fair.
But I definitely don't like all the bells and whistles. "I am God, fear me."
Now let's flip the script entirely on that mode, because on my server, the mods are effectively hidden, right? Anybody who's been in the community for more than an hour knows who the mods are. Anybody who's active knows who the mods are. It's not like it's hidden in the sense that nobody knows who they are. But if somebody just first joins the server, it's not clear who is a mod. My mod role is literally labeled as Hug. And yeah, people are very cognizant of who's a mod, but very simply, but trolls, raiders, people who first join the server and might want to start trouble, don't have the ability to look around and say, "Hey, are there any mods online? Are there any active mods on the forum that are currently, listed as online and active? Is there anybody with a tactical vest nearby?" But that doesn't mean
those are the people that you don't want to, those are the people that matter in that situation. It's like, Yeah, everyone knows the mods, except for the troll who just joined and doesn't see the big moderator category and just assumes, oh, no one's online. I'm free to do whatever I want.
Yeah, which actually can be a benefit because you'll fish that out quickly, right? They'll say, oh, okay, there's not much moderation here, and then the mod can swoop in very effectively, as opposed to, oh, there's a bunch of mods, I'll wait and then I'll post a bunch of terrible things at, 4 a.m. or whatever.
Yeah, very, very effective for a server like yours.
Mm-hmm. Which also leads to another point that I did want to bring up. I still want to go back and talk more about this, but I just wanted to really quickly touch on the idea of have international mods. If you have an international community, have international mods. Don't have all of your mods in the same time zone.
That was actually a big problem we had on Wholesome Memes.
Was it? I believe it. It makes sense.
And pretty much, we had just nobody was even applying from different time zones. And we had a while ago we had a mod that was very, very active, that used to be the head mod, who was over in Europe somewhere, and when he left the mod team, we had a big problem because there's just this huge gap where all the mods were sleeping.
Yeah.
And we had a problem where just the mods would just wake up to 20 DMs like, hey, this guy's causing problems. It's like, we gotta do something about this.
That's a terrible feeling, isn't it?
It really is.
You wake up and your your forum private messages is 1,500 messages. Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
First unread message, urgent. Uh-oh.
And then we immediately opened applications, and we basically ended up accepting someone. And we normally do it based on how active you are, how well we know you, are you someone we know is responsible, someone who's active a lot, someone who is good for helping.
Yeah.
But with this time, none of them we ended up accepting someone who none of us have even met before, simply because they were in a different time zone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and they were a good fit.
Okay,
they're still on the team today.
Right on. We chose wisely.
We chose wisely. We also did have a bunch of other factors, things like age and we could check on the server that a big part of why we never saw them was simply because they are in the other time zone, which is when we needed a mod for.
Yeah.
And we accepted them, talked to them, and they've been doing a good job ever since.
Mm-hmm. I know in my server we have a lot of North America. Then we have 2 people in the EU and 1 person in Southeast Asia.
See, my advantage is I'm North America, but I have a terrible sleep schedule.
which works. That works. I mean, Jack Shadows it has tended to work very strange hours, so they can be awake at functionally much different times, right? They can be an active mod during what would in North America be super weird hours, but it's good times. Functionally, it's the same hours as somebody who's in India or Afghanistan. It was somewhere in that region hours, the night shift, so to speak. Yeah.
Yeah, there's certainly been times when I just happened to be on when something was happening at 2, 3 in the morning, and I'm just like, hey, how's it going? Everyone's like, why are you here? Go to bed.
Fair though. But no, back to the visibility of mods. How much danger is there in people being too friendly with moderators? In the sense of moderators not having teeth because they are a part of the community. Is that a concern for you?
That is very much a problem. It can, because when you see a moderator as a friend, it's very nice for the sense of community. Not so nice for when they tell you to stop doing something and it's just nah.
Yeah.
It's just like, I told you to stop doing this as a mod. You need to stop. But people see you like, oh, you're just another person. You're a friend.
But it does let
And,
you
they might try to.
right?
Mm-hmm. It
I
definitely does.
I know on the Privateer Press forums, someone, it was Hungerford. It was Hungerford. You all know it. if you know Privateer Press stuff, posted a fairly spicy call out on someone, and if he was just somebody who was in the community, it would be a non-issue. It would just be like, haha, this guy got owned. But because he was one of the lead devs, it became an incident. You see what I'm saying? Because
I know exactly what you're talking about. It is
because
so
he was
easy
one of
for
the lead-
somebody who's in a position like that to just, doing the same exact things that regular people do. But then just because of their position,
Right.
it becomes like a huge thing. You end up getting especially on something like a call out where you'll end up getting a whole server of people sending hate towards someone, and that's just terrible.
Oh yeah, that's a content creator's nightmare. If the content creator says, "Man, I don't like this person," and all of a sudden you accidentally send a flood of hate mail their way, it's like, I no, guys, calm down. Fortunately, I'm wholesome enough not to have that happen. Not to like flag a mob towards somebody.
You hate someone? Impossible.
I've got pretty strong opinions sometimes.
Yeah, but usually it's
I've
infrastructure.
been known to have opinions, to be fair. In my offense?
Listen, your hate isn't towards people. It's towards non-walkable roads.
Also true. You did it. You did it. We were talking before the stream about how you were going to work infrastructure into this, and you found a way. You found it.
Yep. You can send all the hate you want towards them. They deserve it, and they also don't have feelings, so send hate to non-walkable roads.
True, though. No, but
back to mods.
But it's also about cultivating the right community, and that is actually what I want to segue into from here, is cultivating a community.
And then here comes
my community is phenomenal. For some reason, people who watch my stuff self-select. They're all cool people. But
oh yeah, you got one of the best, you got one of the most wholesome communities out there.
Considering it's a public-facing server, considering that it's a server that is literally Google searchable, yeah.
It's genuinely impressive.
But that aside, I want to talk about the flip side of it. I want to talk about AlphaRad. Because AlphaRad is a troll. That's kind of his personality. He is abrasive intentionally, and that's part of his content. And he's a very good person in general. He really is a good person, but his persona that he plays up on stream sometimes is a bit more caustic. Is a bit more abrasive intentionally. He'll make troll builds on pass. I'm talking about the time when AlphaRad Plus was a thing. He would make troll builds and troll people online and laugh at people who are bad at Smash Brothers, and unintentionally attract the kind of people who enjoy that kind of content. He would unintentionally attract trolls because of the nature of his content, and this flows directly
those are the type of people who have a huge problem with that kind of thing. And lots of times I'll see them in every single video. They're like, these people I'm talking about, don't go over, don't send hate to them, don't do this, don't do that. And the fact that they need to repeat that every single video really shows how much they're dealing with it.
Right. And once you reach a certain size, it can be very difficult to shift the tone of your community. Something that he has done very effectively, which I think is honestly a good case study. And yeah, you know what? Let's talk about this. Let's talk about how he resolved that, because that's very interesting and relevant. If you don't know, AlphaRad is a YouTuber who has, 4 million subscribers now? He has 1 million subscribers on his side channel. give you a frame of reference. Um,
2.78 million.
oh, I thought it was past 3. Oh, okay. But yeah,
I'll just
his
look it up.
his side channel, AlphaRad, which used to be AlphaRad Plus, his community would call themselves Plussies, and like, okay, sure, whatever, and they would kind of follow lockstep to what he was. If he dissed somebody, he would have a legion of people dissing that person as well. Which even though he was telling people, don't do this, don't fight on my behalf, don't come out and be abrasive towards people, even if I am making fun of somebody, that doesn't give you license to go harass them or make things worse.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't working. It wasn't working for him. His community already had a mind of its own, if you will.
And honestly, a time like that, it's really hard, especially when, you're making a video about like, oh, this is a thing that, let's say this is a bad thing someone did. People are going to get in their minds like, I don't like this person. And even regardless of your influence, they might just, now that they know about it, they might just go do it themselves.
Yeah. But what he did about it is interesting, because he had the size, and there's an interesting, also an interesting ratio, I guess, where this isn't a problem until you're a certain size, right? And after you're a certain size, it's harder to manage and harder to fix, but it's also not a problem until you're a certain size as well, right? If you have, 30 followers, you're probably not going to be sending a lynch mob after somebody if you say something wrong, because everybody in the community has more direction, and it doesn't have the uncontrollable mind of its own that someone of that size has, right?
What about someone with 1,500?
Not quite. I honestly would say probably... I guess Pack Tactics has that, and he's at 40k now, I think. So yeah, probably somewhere... It's got to be past 10k. I don't know where the threshold is. And it's obviously going to be different for every community. It's going to be different for every group. But as a point where influencers actually become able to influence, and part of a point where influencers become unable, and because the communities have a mind of their own. Anyways, what AlphaRad did to resolve this, I find fascinating. Because he effectively executed his community. He took his side channel offline for something like 6 months. Now, this would be suicide for a smaller channel. So this is, I'm not saying this is a good advice, but the other thing he did is he rebranded that channel. Because most of the problems were coming from his side channel, which is just a simple gameplay let's play channel, which honestly is, in my opinion, some of his best content. But he rebranded it from AlphaRad Plus with all the people who called themselves Plussies and were standing up for him even when he didn't want it, I think is a good way of describing it. He rebranded it to AlphaRad Deluxe with the intention of saying you can't make a community name after this. You can't say you're a Deluxey. You can't identify with the community as easily. He intentionally made it harder for his community to band together, which I find fascinating. Now, he has enough size and clout and weight behind him that he was able to do this. If you're a game dev studio, you probably can't pull this off without losing your base, frankly. But he took a culling axe to his base and told people, hey, if you're not cool, we don't want you here, which is fair and good. But then he backed it up by changing the nature of his community, by reducing the amount of community engagement by having a name. And that's a very common thing to do, like something that I'm terrible at. But a lot of VTubers do, they'll have a pet name for their communities, right? Almost every VTuber does that. I just call people my friends. Technically, we have Crewbolds as my community name. I've used that like 3 times total because I'm bad at building community, despite being.
Oh no!
But
you got like one of the most close-knit communities I've seen with like a YouTuber, and then you say, "Oh, I'm bad at making a community."
I do what I can.
You don't need a name. We're friends.
But by taking away that name, he took away a part of what people call are identifying with, the way that people's self-identification to the channel. And I feel like that's interesting and relevant, right? That was a way he was able to cull that sort of problem. Because you can have a Nazi problem, right? That can crop up, that can happen if you're not paying close enough attention, right? I'm not saying that he did particularly, though I think that was one of the concerns. But through no fault of his own, the dude's fantastic, but he had a whole bunch of people who were a lot less cool that decided that they were going to be a part of that community. And,
yeah, you got pretty lucky with that on that front so far.
Yeah. Well, it helps that I'm very, vocally pro-LGBT, that...
True.
That does... I mean, that genuinely does help. I mean, without getting too deep into politics...
Wholesome.
Yeah, without getting too deep into politics, people who are against LGBT rights are more aggressive and abrasive and trolly people. That's really is just a consistent factor across many communities.
They probably couldn't even stand you, let alone be a part of your community.
Right. Yeah, that's just a fact. So, and if you're watching this and you're saying, well, I don't necessarily want to stand up for LGBT rights, like, you know what, that's fine, that's on you, but you need to be conscious of the community that you're culturing, right? I'm not saying that that's inherently better. I am saying that that is a good indicator of a more healthy community than the other way around.
Yeah. I mean, you don't really even have to. Like, I mean, obviously it's a good thing if you do, but like, as long as you're just not actively against, if it's just like, yeah, they exist, that's cool.
They exist.
No strong opinions. They can exist if they want. Like, that's fine. You don't have to actively be fighting. You don't have to go out and do some protest or whatever. You can.
But again,
you can be good.
What is the community that you're cultivating? In Alphared's situation, it was because he had a lot of troll videos, that he got a lot of trolls, but you know what else has a problem with this? One of my friends is working on a ships at sea game with with a very heavy military focus. That's... Yep. I don't even need to say it. You know what I'm thinking.
I know exactly. Because they'll think of themselves as your military, and if you don't like something, then they automatically don't like it and want to fight it.
No. You can play as actual ships from various countries.
Oh, no, I'm just saying that people who would want to...
Including Axis countries.
Be in a... Yeah, oh. Yeah, yeah.
There it is. Now, I can hear that in your voice, like, yeah, but... Oh.
Yep.
Well, it's true though, right? Like that is a fair.
It is very true.
That is a concern, right? Because you are immediately attracting people who are favorable to those opinions, shall we say? And it's like that's bad. That's a danger, right? That is a concern.
Yep.
But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't approach that in your game. That doesn't mean that you can't have a game that has a healthy community that is about World War II, right? That doesn't mean that you have to destroy everything, like, that doesn't mean it's impossible, but it means that you have an uphill battle in the community that you're cultivating. Right?
Yeah.
Whereas...
And I was just gonna say that a lot of times games like that, military games, especially shooters, just, like, tend to get people who... in that community, if you're just like, hey, I don't like this, then they'll be like, they want... I mean, you can already see, based on the games that they play, that they like to pretend that they're a military.
In power.
So they want to be like, oh, I'm your military, you don't like this, I'm gonna go attack it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a more aggressive mindset. The other thing that can feed an aggressive mindset, which I touched on at the beginning of the stream, is if you have a game that focuses on cooperation And if it's possible for one person to throw the game for 4 or 40 other people, if one person's failures can lead to either a raid wipe or a team loss, people are going to get very angry at the person that caused that loss.
Oh man, I played CSGO for about 15 seconds before someone yelled a racial slur.
Fair, and that's another game where you have, literal terrorists, right? That's not as focused, but that's a military game that is about, terrorism, counterterrorism, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have that military
Those
mindset.
kinds of games definitely. I mean, I'm definitely not saying those kinds of games are bad. They're great games.
Yeah.
But they just attract people like that.
I've played Counter-Strike professionally, and I've also played Dota semi-professionally, and Dota's a really, really good example of that because...
Yeah, how many hours you got in that? Like 10,000 or something?
Something like that. Honestly, I mean, I can't check because I can't tell what my log is for the for Dota Classic on the Warcraft 3 side, but several.
Let's just say 12.
Sure, 12 hours, perfect. But no, the difficulty there is that one bad player in Dota or Counter-Strike or a raid in a 40-man raid in Final Fantasy XI. If you're in Dynamis, one person can ruin the raid for 39 other people potentially, right? Or there's several games that have that sort of situation where one person can ruin other people's gameplay experience, and that is a very dangerous situation because if you lose it. These are longer games too, right? These are games that usually have at least a half-hour investment in something like a full Counter-Strike match, where you're going, first to 12 or first to 15, depending on what you're going towards, or a game of Dota that can last an hour, or a raid that can last 3 hours. If one person can ruin the experience for other people, they're going to be angry, and they can lash out.
Especially if it's near the end.
Yep. And there's not much you as the developer can do for that, because you don't necessarily want to diminish the influence and the effect that one person can have on the raid, because that can hurt your design, right? If one person can't throw the raid, that means that one person isn't important to the raid, and that means that the players know that, and the players will feel unimportant, and the players will feel like they're not as effective as a part of the team. Like, that isn't necessarily a good game design. Not always, but that isn't necessarily a good game design, in many situations, depending on what your game's going for. But it leads naturally to that point where people can dogpile on a single individual and ostracize them and make them feel bad and make them feel like everything's their fault. Even if it is, they shouldn't feel that way, right? Even if it is their fault, that should be a learning experience where they say, I'm sorry, and people say, try again next time. But, like, that's a very difficult thing to do. And I think it gets easier as you get bigger, because then you can involve MMRs, matchmaking ratios, or ELOs, or things like of that nature, to make sure that people are paired with people around the same skill level, or enabling a mentor system so that somebody who joins a game has a flag that says they help newbies, or a flag that says they are a newbie. Though that can also lead to different types of ostracization, right? This is more getting into the game side than the community side, but that is part of your community, and that bleeds over very easily.
I mean, it really does, especially when you have a community about a game. And then say get people playing together, and then one of them does poorly, the other one might just start attacking them in your community.
Yeah. And how can you mitigate that from a community side, from your side of things? I would ask you that. If you are doing that, how do you handle that?
If I'm doing what?
If you're moderating, from a moderator standpoint.
Well, honestly, I'd probably go at it same as any other conflict. Try to de-escalate, try to start off, try to just de-escalate, try to get them to calm down, make up to each other.
Just general de-escalation stuff.
and
Okay.
if needed, either move them to a muted room so that they're separated from the rest of the server, so that they're not causing issues in the rest of the server. Because seeing people fighting can be very distressing for people
Yeah.
in the
Mm-hmm.
community.
Yeah, if it's
And
a big call out, yeah.
yeah,
Big
or
public call out.
even just go to a mute. You can try to work it out with the mods, or even just tell them, hey, go to DMs. This isn't the place to be having this kind of conversation.
Now, here's the fun pivot on that. You ready for this?
Let's hear it.
What if the aggression is directed at an in-game faction or an in-game function? What if the aggression isn't targeted towards a person? What if there's the same level of vitriol as an argument directed towards everybody who plays elves? Everybody who plays, or even just, the mechanics of a character. If anybody who plays, I think Teemo is one of the people a lot of people hate in League. Is that correct? Maybe,
I don't know. I don't play League.
Like, that's a different situation, right? That's not a de-escalation between two people. That's a de-escalation of your game's community, based on your development. Or worse yet, what if the people who play that character start getting really angry about a nerf or a buff that to somebody else that counters them, right?
Yep.
I can, we'll talk about, this is the thing I want to talk about, but there's one example I can think of really easily, and this goes back to Private Press again. One of the factions in War Machine, throughout like 3/4 of the game's history, has intentional anti-synergy. That is to say, they had some abilities that were very powerful, but they intentionally worked against the army sometimes. That is, for example, they have abilities that gain bonuses anytime a character with a soul dies. So anytime a living creature dies, they get a bonus. And the characters that get this are constructs. They're animated to golems. They don't have souls. They don't get these. And it's like, oh, so you mean I need to have the characters that don't buff this character to do that? It's like, the answer is actually yes. You're supposed to have a blend of both so that you can get the benefits of each side. But people would be like, this is terrible anti-synergy. This is terrible. Like would complain about it incessantly. For like a good 10 years, people would complain about this.
Oh man.
But yeah, this idea of the hatred being directed towards the game or towards a faction in the game or a character in the game, rather than towards somebody else in the community. How do you feel about this?
That gets a bit more difficult. And I'd say, honestly, that's probably a bit more out of my expertise.
Okay.
As that'd be more of a developer.
All right, well, I'll talk
saying
on this side for a second,
something
then.
like, we intend this.
And,
I've certainly seen that happen, and I've certainly had to deal with it.
Well, I'll talk on this side for a bit then, because I've seen this several times, and what you actually said is actually one of a fantastic answer. Is to give a developer response that says, "Hey, I understand your concern. Let me explain our developer thought process for you." And that's usually what developers want to do, anyways. Like, the developer team wants to say, "Oh yeah, we were thinking about this, and this is supposed to work with this," and like explaining their own thought process. Not always. Like Sapphire says, and someone complaining about a certain weapon in Splatoon. Well, Nintendo is famously closed mouth on its moderation, and things of that nature. So, I'm not necessarily saying which is the better or worse course, but that's definitely a different way of handling it. But one thing you can do is talk openly with your clients, with your player base. Yeah, talk openly with your player base about what they are experiencing and what you are intending for them to experience, and where the discrepancy lies between, right? The difference between what the players are going for and hoping for, and what they're experiencing, and reassure their emotions, like, yeah, that is supposed to work that way, or maybe it's not supposed to work that way, and maybe we will take a look at this and we'll address it in a future patch, which is unsatisfying, but is a valid response all the same.
Well, there's not much you can do about that.
Mm-hmm.
It's just
but if
part of the game.
Yeah, if it gets too vitriolic, then you might need to change a character. But what if it is a character like Techies, where you would have to change the nature of the character? Techies, it drops landmines across the map, and it feels bad to be walking in what should be a safe area only to explode, right? And there's no way of changing that other than changing the nature of the character. It's like, well, he's supposed to work like that. Rogues in various MMOs are always a good example of this. Like, oh, everyone hates getting ganked by a rogue because there's no counterplay. You die before you have a chance to win, but you died because you didn't have detection. You didn't know there was a rogue there. You weren't playing cautiously because a rogue might be present. It is the player's fault. But boy, howdy, do people hate being told that.
That's a very big thing. It is very difficult for people to accept. Skill issue.
Skill issue, yep. I'm just saying, if you were better, it wouldn't be a problem.
Get good.
Or the thing with the anti-synergy. The faction was called Scorn, and they had intentionally designed anti-synergy in there, and they were still getting tournament wins. They were still throughout a good portion of their history getting top 1 or 2, but they were consistently placing top 10s in tournaments. And it's like, the faction's balanced. If you're having this problem, well, that's on you, buddy. It's like, yeah, it's true, but you should. But do you really want to say that? Do you want to make that your public statement?
Yep. It is. Yeah, that's a thing. It's very hard to tell someone, you're just bad.
Yeah. I've told you about the noob cannon, right?
About the what?
The noob cannon?
I don't think so.
Oh, I love the story about the noob cannon. It was...
let's hear it.
Modern Warfare 2? Maybe? It was either Modern Warfare or Call of Duty. I forget which exact game it was. I think it was the second one in whichever series it was. There was a grenade launcher. It was an M16 with an underslung grenade launcher, I think. I don't know the exact gun. Anyways, it was a grenade launcher that you point at in a direction and pull the trigger and it makes an explosion. And the worse you were at the game, the better this was. It was an equalizer. Pro players never touched it, because it rarely did enough damage to full kill somebody off unless you got a direct hit. It had prohibitively low ammunition count. It was considered by pro players not to be a good weapon for professional play. But if you didn't know the game, if you were bad, if you were not good at the game, you could score kills, you could clear zones, you could deal 75% damage to 4 people and get top damage charts if you had it. And medium players didn't have counterplay to this. You see what I'm saying? You see where this is going, right? Medium skilled players who were good enough to know that the pros were not using this weapon, that therefore they weren't going to use it either, but then they were getting killed by it consistently, were super angry at the weapon's existence. But there's a strong argument to say the weapon is healthy for the state of the game. Right? It gives you
and you definitely need something like that. You can't just alienate people because they're not as good. It's, from a game dev perspective, like, you alienating people from your game is definitely not what you want, especially if it's newer players. I mean, that's what you want to attract to your game. So you have something like that. Yeah.
Carl says there was some pro grenade launcher users, but full well that those were niche cases. Those were situational things that was by and large shunned by the pro community. You're not wrong, but it's like saying that pros don't use techies. Yeah, but it won TI one time.
Yeah.
Like, Yeah, it's by and large considered to be that. And yeah, you need an entry-level weapon that feels good to use and is easy to learn and will be
Hmm.
effective against people who are above you in skill level. But then you have this toxicity towards it. It's like, oh man, he's using that. He must be
Yeah.
bad. Yeah, he might be bad, but he's currently got more kills than you. Like,
Yeah,
and
but you definitely. I mean, something like that is very good for like from a design perspective because
mhm,
you want something that obviously the pro players know how to deal with it, know how to they know how to deal with it,
mhm.
but like the new players can still be effective using it.
They can still participate more effectively. Yeah. Go check out my Valorant weapons discussion stream where I actually go in depth into this particular thing from a game design standpoint. But what I'm talking about more is oh, the Phantos Noob Cannon was the community name they gave it. It was not actually called that. That's what people who played called it because of the nature of the weapon. But yeah, if you want a more deeper dive into this particular type of development and design, go check out my Valorant vs CS Counter-Strike stream. But what I want to focus on here is the community aspect, right? Of people saying, "Oh, that's terrible," or "Oh, anybody who uses that is bad," or just the fact that it was called the Noob Cannon, the fact that that name stuck, right?
And this whole conversation is reminding me a lot about Overwatch.
Hmm.
And that's definitely a game that's had its fair share of salt over
It has.
everything. And
Yeah.
every time an update comes out that nerfs something, buffs something, there's people that enjoy it, yeah. And overall, it probably helps the game. But people are gonna get angry about it,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and very,
And that
very vocal.
doesn't mean they're gonna stop playing.
Oh yeah, they keep playing. I mean, usually it's people who play the most that complain the most because
Mm-hmm.
it changed from what they're used to, and they got to learn some new tactic. They got to change their play. The pros that have their their skill, their their plays, their
Mm-hmm.
tactics. They just if I do this, I will win.
Mm-hmm.
And now suddenly the thing that they do to win gets nerfed,
Then they
and they're
feel like it was
off in
they might
arms.
feel like even that it was a personal attack, right? They
I
might
was
feel like
just good at
that
this.
yeah, they might feel that nerf. They might feel so attached that comes across incorrectly as an attack directly on them and their playstyle.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Especially in
It's
multiplayer
incredible.
games.
Even in games that have thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, million, it keeps going up. Millions of people, tens of million, even hundreds of million.
Mm-hmm.
But you still manage to have people feel like they are personally getting attacked.
All right, I do want to share a comic here. This is not a meme review, but I do want to share a comic because it's relevant.
Mini meme review.
Yeah. Can I show this here effectively? I don't know. Whatever else, put on top of stuff
I'm
for
too
now.
big.
Yay, the new version is out. Thanks for all the hard work, Ice Frog, who is the developer for Dota and was the developer for Dota for several years. Came out all the way back in like early 2000s. Let me give it a try. What is this? Is this some kind of joke? This new version is trash. Seriously, what the heck? Screw you, Ice Frog. Is this what the beta team has been doing? I'll never play this version again. This, right? The people who are angry about it are still going to play, and you're not necessarily going to dissuade them from being a part of the game or your community, nor should you, nor are you trying to do that. But yeah, they
What I
angry
find very surprising?
they're angry because they're so passionate. Sorry, go on. Yes.
Mm-hmm. What I find surprising is how much this happens with Minecraft. You think, Like, you've played Minecraft, you know, creative block game.
Barely.
People get so passionate about it,
I am
and like,
famously bad at Minecraft. Yeah, people get passionate about it because and they're passionate about your game. That's not, that is hand in hand. They are intentionally, like that. They are angry because they're passionate about your game. That is your base. And the question is, how much are you trying to appeal to your base versus how much attention do you actually have to spend about, dealing with that, right?
I just looked. There's a recent example with I'm not even going to talk about the chat reporting. I'll go back a little bit further. That's a whole nother can of worms. But with in an update, adds all these cool things. New biomes, new trees, new everything's all pretty. It adds frogs. Who doesn't love frogs?
Mm-hmm.
But one thing they were going to add that they said they were going to add, in way back before it was released, was fireflies.
Mm-hmm.
Which, from a game design's perspective, I mean, completely useless. It's a particle effect that flies around in the air, and frogs attack it sometimes.
Okay.
But then they
Sounds
learned,
reasonable so far.
yeah, fireflies are poisonous to frogs. So they're like, we don't want to teach people. We don't want to be like, oh, some kid with a pet frog is going to be like, oh, frogs eat fireflies. I saw this in Minecraft. I'm going to go feed my pet frog some fireflies, and then it dies. That's not good.
Right.
And people were so aggressively against this particle effect. And also another big thing is, like, it wasn't even just that. It was because it's by the nature of a particle effect is it's gonna tank lower end systems.
True.
And they wanted it to be more accessible. And now you got this thing completely useless, poisonous to frogs, which its main mechanic is getting eaten by frogs, and could potentially tank lower end systems. Pretty
Bad
reasonable
plan.
that they removed it, right?
Yeah, sounds like a bad plan. Yeah.
But people were so up in arms, furious everywhere. Just all you could hear about was just firefly this, firefly that.
Interesting.
I mean, you even got Safi talking in all caps in the comment section because of it.
That takes something. That counts for something.
Yeah. And like, something like that, completely reasonable decision. Mm-hmm. But people just don't like it. So it gets very, very aggressive very, very easily. And even in a peaceful game like Minecraft, if it can happen in Minecraft of all games, imagine a competitive game.
Yeah.
Like Dota or CSGO or any of those.
So, yeah. I do have something that reminds me of that I do want to talk about. I'll let you finish your thoughts, though.
Oh, not much left. Just that, something like this is surprisingly common. And pretty much every update. Fireflies, glow squids, everything.
So you're talking about managing your community from the development side of things, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like be conscious from the development side of things about how things are going to affect your community, rather than when you're implementing them, for the emotional connections people are going to have. Yeah, that's
and
a
that
fair
it's
point.
very, very difficult. I mean, sometimes it's very difficult. I mean, completely reasonable, makes sense, from their perspective. But like from the perspective of someone who is super hyped up about fireflies, it's just,
Yeah.
they're going to get angry about it.
Wow.
Uh-oh, it's nap time.
Sorry to grab something. So, something similar that I want to keep on talking about, this idea of developing from a community standpoint, because I feel like that's extremely important to consider. And I'm going to go back to War Machine on this. Can you tell that I played War Machine for several years? Well...
No, what gave that away?
So, they had a balance problem, and it's not the kind of balance problem that you would think. And I find it absolutely fascinating how it happened. The balance problem came from the community. Now, it's a tabletop game. And that from its base level means that you don't have metrics, right? That means that you don't have a list of what little Timmy is playing on Saturday afternoon at their local game store, right? You don't have, 1,000 pieces of information to pull from. You just don't. It's just the nature of things. And that's a problem because what they were seeing for their balance was 3 things. There were 3 things that they were conscious of and conscientious of when it came to game balance. The first is, of course, tournament results. Because they had tournament metrics and lists and army compositions and win rates for the top level of play. Right? The second thing they had was forums. They had what people were complaining about, what people were saying was underpowered, overpowered, unbalanced, needs to be fixed, etc. Not necessarily what is unbalanced, but what people were saying is unbalanced. This goes back into cocaine logic. Actually, this is the stream where I'm actually going to talk about cocaine logic, isn't it? Maybe not. Anyways.
That's such a funny title, though.
It is. The short version for people who haven't heard that term, if you give people cocaine, they're very happy and they enjoy it, right? They love it. So, to make everybody in our society happy, you should give everybody a whole bunch of cocaine all the time. Right? That does make sense, right? Is there a problem with that, Dirk?
Okay, now somebody clip that and take it out of context.
You do it. Is there a problem with that? With that line of thought? Because, I mean, that's what people are saying that they want. The idea is that...
I think there may be a slight problem.
Maybe, but... The problem is that, what people say they want and what is healthy for the game for the game and what they actually want are 2, sometimes 3 different things. That's what cocaine logic is. And in the application in this situation is people saying what needs to be fixed isn't necessarily what actually needs to be fixed, but they only had 3 things that they could pull from for balance information. The first is tournament results, and the second is forums. And the third doesn't actually help. The third is sales metrics. The third is just what are people buying. Like, that doesn't actually tell you a lot about... I mean, it tells you a lot about game balance because it tells you what metas are and what people are moving towards and what people want, are focusing on. But that doesn't actually tell you how the games are playing out, right? Goes into that whole Reddit problem of which I did an entire stream on it as well, of people following builds that are posted as quote unquote the best. So what happens when you have these 3 points? Which of these do you weight more heavily? What the community says needs to be fixed, what the tournament results say, and what people buy, which again, we can throw away what people buy because that's not actually that good of a metric, frankly. But, of these other 2, the game had an issue for several years where they were balancing towards the top players. They were balancing based off of these tournament results and hurting the game for the lower end, for the casual players. And in every game, the casual players are 90% of your base. At least. Somewhere in the range of, 80 to 90 to 95% of your base, In some games like Splatoon, obviously that number is going to be higher. In some games that are intentionally designed to be competitive, like, what's that soccer tabletop game?
What are you trying to find the word for?
Not Blood Bowl, but the Privateer Press equivalent of... That wasn't actually Privateer Press, it was a bit of a company that... One second here. Say words while I'm looking this up.
Words. Words.
It's just gonna bug me if I don't find it.
Yeah. Words. So, how's it going, chat? Uh-oh, everyone's saying words now.
Sorry, but my brain cannot proceed until I find this. It was a soccer, that is to say, a football style game that was designed from the ground up to be extremely competitive, and they were intentionally targeting the competitive marketplace. And yeah, even then, you still have a majority of your community being casual players.
Yeah.
And
I definitely don't play any sports games or anything like that. So.
Oh, this was fantasy. This was sports in name only. Like this was like it was sports in the way that Blood Bowl is a football game.
Fantasy soccer. Ooh.
Yeah, it was a fantasy soccer thing. She might have gone
that
under.
Sounds odd.
I can't find it. Oh well.
So,
anyways,
chat, how are you doing today?
So, anyways. Even then,
we had a very nice conversation.
You need to focus a lot of your balance around the casual players because they make up the majority of your population.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm. And if you only balance towards competition, or worse, if you only pull metrics from competition, then you're going to have, well, you're going to be ostracizing the majority of your community, and then again.
Oh, that reminds me of something.
And then going back into the side of this, if you balance based on what people say needs to be balanced, without actually pulling both casual and professional metrics, you run the risk of destroying what makes part of your game fun, which goes back into the rogue issue.
I think I know exactly what game you're talking about.
Oh?
Oh no, I don't know what the name of it or anything, but just like when you were saying like balance it to casual versus competitive, I remember hearing about a game where they only balanced it for competitive play, and then the casual play was so messed up because of it. And now I don't remember what it's called either. It's gonna bug me too now.
Regardless, but yeah.
It also reminds me of the opposite scenario, where there's games that want to target, those small percent that really plays the games a lot because of microtransactions, where, a lot of people play the game, but, they play it for free or they play it for very low. But then they focus it on a few people who are super competitive and are putting in ridiculous amounts of money.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and I found it. It's Guild Ball. It was Guild Ball. It actually did. The reason I was having trouble finding it is because it went defunct in 2020.
It's actually pretty recent.
Mm-hmm.
That was like a month ago.
Yeah, more or less. But yeah, that was the one I was thinking, like, where they were intentionally designing from the ground up for competitive play to the ostracization of casual play. Now, there were other issues with Guild Ball, and I think something else happened in 2020. I don't remember. Anyways, but that was a concern.
Talking about 2020 is not even over yet.
True. But that was a concern, and I think it's something that needs to be thought about. And then when War Machine did come out with an app that that allowed you to build armies, I'll remember this. I was actually talking with Hungerford directly I was actually out to dinner with Hungerford, and like, why didn't you pull metrics from all players? Why didn't you pull metrics from every single player, casual player, to see what people are building and using together? That would have been so valuable. And he just looks at me and says, "Damn it, you're right." Because they outsourced the app. They didn't make the app themselves. They were just like, yeah, that would have been a really good idea. Was that Hungerford or Souls? Dang, I don't. It was one of the lead devs at the time. But they were, they focused more on the gameplay and game design. And they outsourced the app to another studio for that, and everybody who played, even casually, used that app. It's like that would have been such a great resource to be able to get the information about all of what the casual players are doing. Anyways, all of this, to round it back into the community side of it, is to say that what the community says they want, what the pro players appear to need, and what is best for your game can be either 2 or 3 or possibly even 4 different answers, right? And you need to
watch out for the what's it called? Vocal minority.
Yeah.
You got a few people who are very loud versus, most of your players, the casual players.
Mm-hmm.
Who
and
just kind of...
You need to be willing to acknowledge when you have made a mistake, right?
Yeah.
One of the classic
correcting your mistakes is a very important aspect.
Yeah. Control is a valid playstyle. How many people in chat just got their hackles up? How many people in chat just immediately responded with... But... like, seriously, though. Control games, control playstyles are valid, but frustrating to one player. Right? By their nature, that it's one player telling the other player they can't do something, and that can be very healthy for a game, but can also create negative play experiences, which makes people say, anywhere from anything from a tabletop game where you have things like, someone who can snipe your army off the board turn 1. Well, yeah, then you can just counterplay to that, but you might be forcing somebody to play something they don't want to play, to Magic the Gathering, where people get angry at blue control, and for a good chunk of the 90s and early 2000s, there was a genuine hatred towards anybody who played hard control blue. And understandably, because they had so many tools and so many resources that you had to ask permission to engage in the game, to play the game.
But it's fun.
Yeah, well, stasis control was the worst, where nobody had fun. Nobody's allowed to have fun in stasis control. But
no.
not even getting into that. But
okay, but you got to admit, being able to tell your opponent, no.
Then you have things like that are soft control, like Valorant, where you can give somebody a temporary blind or a flashbang effect that makes them unable to see or hear for moments. Or one of the new heroes in Valorant creates phantom noises, where the enemy players all hear footsteps in random directions and they don't know which ones are real. It's like, that doesn't...
I like that concept.
Yeah, it limits the play options of the player, but in a way that doesn't feel as dominant and as oppressive as blue control, or as stasis decks, or as a time walk feat in going back to War Machine, or as board control like Techies or Teemo, where you can control the board from anywhere on the map. I think it is Teemo that I'm referring to. I don't know League, but like that is a consideration of control is a valid playstyle. But you need to be able to effectively decide how much control is control. How much control are you intending to have? And seeing your community's reactions is a good way to gauge that, right? If people are yelling about it, they might have a valid reason. They might feel like they don't have enough agency in the game. That's where community management, is healthy for your game, is to be able to say, hey, this style of play is hurting our game, right? People hate this so much that we and if one person tells you that they're walking away from the game, there's two sides of that story, right? On one hand, they might not be. They might just leave for a few days, then come back.
Yeah.
Or the one person who says that might represent 300 people who just left without saying anything, right?
True.
And
Because a lot of times that's what happens. I mean, sometimes you get angry enough that you want people to know, but lots of times, honestly, I'd even go as far as to say most of the time, when you leave a game, you just kind of leave. You're
Right
not
down and
telling
walk away.
anyone. You're not any of that.
Mm-hmm. You're quietly leaving the community because you decided the game isn't saying you want to play anymore.
That's gotta be one of the hardest parts with game dev is
Fishing that
when
out.
there's problems that people don't tell you about.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's also sometimes when there's problems that people tell you too much about, especially when those problems are not actually problems.
Like the anti-synergy thing that I was saying before, where that wasn't a problem,
Yeah.
but it was perceived as a problem, and that was... The fact that it was perceived as a problem made it into a problem.
Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of times where it's like somebody doesn't understand a game mechanic or something like that, and then it's just like, they just assume, this is bad, this is buggy, this is...
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to play this.
Yeah, this is unfair. I think that's one of the ones you hear a lot. Like, oh, that's unfair.
Yeah, unfair.
Mm-hmm. That goes back to the rogues one, where the player didn't have agency because they didn't prepare properly, or they didn't have the information that they felt was relevant to the situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's definitely sometimes there's play styles like Control or Rogues or them that are a lot more fun for one side because it's tedious to counter.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It can be countered, definitely. It's balanced, but it's tedious, and that makes it very hard for, somebody who's just playing the game to have a little fun. They're not going to be doing they don't want to be dealing with that.
And a lot of that, from a development standpoint, comes down to mental load, which I actually do plan on doing a full stream on talking about mental load, because that is something that is under-considered in game development. Oh, actually, Carl brings up a very good point, and that is series loyalty. They say that they ditched Diablo Immortal despite liking 1, 2, and 3. Yeah. The idea that you can be loyal to a series rather than an individual game, and that's actually a very excellent point that we haven't really brought up yet. Is how
that's
much
a whole nother.
How much of your community is based off of momentum of titles, like Supergiant Games, right? They've had banger titles left and right, and people will know that the next Supergiant game that comes out is going to be good. People used to feel that way about Diablo.
Especially when you get the Supergiant games that are really good, and then they're like, work on out with the next one, and then they hype it up, and then it's a great game, don't get me wrong, great game, but it's just not as good as the first, and everyone gets disappointed.
And then they release Pyre, yeah. I know at least one person in my audience is angry about that statement. But yeah,
a lot of the games that I've played are like that. And just look at games like Borderlands. People love Borderlands 2. Great game, amazing game.
It is.
Borderlands 3 comes out, also great game, amazing game. Honestly, I'd even say the mechanics of the game are even better. Story, not as much. And yeah, I still think it's an excellent game, but not as good. And a lot of people are angry at that because it's not as good as the one that came before it. Borderlands, and you got like Subnautica Below Zero. Amazing game, excellent game. But a lot of people don't like it because it's not as they had high expectations after the first.
So here's the question for you then. At what point does people complaining about a new release become a moderation issue? Should you police people giving you bad reviews? At a certain point, I think you have to, but the question is, where is that point? And is that point something that is... Well, I guess let's start out with saying that. Is there a point? Is there a point where you should be moderating negative sentiment towards a game? That game's community. Not in general, not on Twitter, inside of that game's community. Sorry, I just want to clarify that because that is important. Yeah. I'm not saying that you should bury bad reviews. I'm not saying that. I'm talking about in the game's community.
I'd say it depends on how constructive it is. If it's just like this game is bad, then yeah, no, that's not adding anything. That's not constructive. I'd say don't do that. But if it's like I'm not a fan of this mechanic because XYZ, that's constructive. That's helpful. Maybe even a dev will see that and be like, "Oh, I didn't think about this. I want to change some balancing. I want to add an update. I want to, it's constructive. It's helpful." But if it's just like somebody coming in like, this game is bad. This other game is better than it is. That doesn't add anything.
How would you approach that moderation, though? How would you approach? Like, I agree that is something that should probably be at a certain point, especially if it's really aggressively stated. But how can you moderate that? Because that's not necessarily breaking the rules, and it becomes a thought policing concern. It can be the point where it's like, well, you can't say that you don't like this. That's not a good stance to take. But at the same time,
well, I'd say, like you mentioned, rules. I'd say just put in the rules, be constructive.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're obviously allowed to have an opinion. Your opinions are valid, but like, it also depends on how the community is structured. If there's like a channel about, bugs and suggestions and that kind of stuff, and then people are flooding it with, "I hate this game is bad," that's not constructive. But if there's like a channel like in general chat or something like that, then like, yeah, go out and say like, "Oh, I don't like this game." And then there's also just obviously how you say it. Like, if you're just like, the game is bad, then like, don't be that guy. But if it's like, I'm not a fan of this game, then yeah, that's your opinion, totally valid.
Right.
And people might want to hear that.
That's fair, but yeah, it's interesting though, right? There's an interesting discussion to be had there, I think, right? Because, yeah, you don't want them to be bringing down everybody else in the server. You don't and okay. You don't want that to break your community or to negatively impact your game, even if it ends up being true. Right? Which means you want to moderate it even if you shouldn't. Even if they're not doing anything quote-unquote wrong, there is a desire there to control that situation, to control that discussion.
And that's one of the hardest parts is at what point, obviously you have to, moderating is all about controlling the situation, but at what point do you become a control freak? Like, what time, at what point is it too far?
There's probably a really good breakdown of Heroes of New Earth where the dev basically became a thought police of blocking and banning people who were saying negative things about the game. And that's an extreme example, but it's an example that happened, right? That's an example that happened with a relatively popular game. It's still a relevant thing that happened. And yeah, conversely, especially in the tabletop sector, you can have a bunch of people turn against your game for reasons that don't actually exist, right? For preconceived notions, like that anti-synergy thing I said before. That can be... that can be something that you need to keep an eye on and make sure that people are being... I think I agree with what you say. So if you are just, trashing the game, if you were just yelling at the game, that's not productive, and you could raise an argument towards saying, hey, but you'd have to be transparent about it. You couldn't just, if you just remove the post, then you were creating a PR nightmare for yourself, right? But if you exactly, but if you say, hey, I'm taking this post down because this is just whining with no constructive criticism. If you want to, say something, that about the game, then feel free. But if it's just complaining, then don't do it. But you have to be.
You could even link this back to just moderating in general. And you look at, like, for example, in actually, I was about to say in a server, but in pretty much any server I moderate it, like, the rule of thumb is if somebody posts something that's not allowed, we don't just delete it. We delete it ping them and be like, hey, this is not allowed because XYZ.
Yeah. And in some situations, when you delete it, you might need to make that, hey, this isn't allowed because XYZ, in a public setting, right? That might be something that you need to say publicly.
Oh yeah, usually it's in whatever. Usually we say it in whatever channel it was originally posted in.
Oh yeah. Or a thread, or a forum, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We're not getting into voice chat moderation right now. That's another bag of worms.
Oh boy.
I think that's honestly outside of the scope of this comment. This is everything we've said applies to forums and chat rooms of various types, and honestly, a lot of it applies to something like Twitter as well. We're not getting into promotion and growing community, and we're not getting into voice chat moderation. Those are two other bags of worms that I don't really think are inside of the scope of this stream, because we're already at the 2-hour mark right now.
Oh boy. Other than a few stories.
Mm-hmm.
Thankfully, other than a few certain things, a few stories I got. Thankfully, I haven't had to deal much with voice chat issues.
Although I do want to say, we're going to go to audience questions in just a moment, so feel free to start typing them out. But one thing I did want to comment on is one thing that I attribute some of my success in community to, that I've used on a couple of different projects, and that's positive voice. Positive voice is extremely valuable. I'm going to read off the rules for my Discord server. Be friendly and uplifting to everyone. If you have drama, take it to PM, private messages, or mods as appropriate. Advertise only in self-promotion. Don't advertise outside of self-promotion. Advertise only in self-promotion. You hear the positive voice there. Everything must be kept safe for work and appropriate for small lizards. Again, adding a casual twist and a casual tone to the rule, and keeping it in positive voice. Everything must be kept safe for work. Don't do XYZ. Use English or Japanese as your primary language. So we don't really have a lot of people who are Japanese here, aside from like Pencha, and they came long after the rule was written. If you know a piece of art, source at it, and the only negative voice rule is no human politics. They're weird and dumb. That's the only negative voice rule of all of them. And then everybody's valid, just as a fun, last rule to soften it after that. That I just wanted to
even
mention.
The negative one, you added, by adding they're weird and dumb. And by specifying human politics and all that,
it makes it playful. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. It makes it playful, and I think that really goes a long way towards by making everything in positive voice. People who are reading it are. It doesn't feel like rules so much as it feels like guidelines, and I would actually argue that's the difference between rules and guidelines, right? A rule is something that you must follow. A guideline is a feeling you should follow, and people will do what they should by and large, unless they have a reason not to, right? And so, by keeping things in a positive voice, it encourages people to act well rather than discouraging them from acting poorly. I have another example I'm going to use, and I am absolutely 100% throwing Adrian under the bus here. I think you know what this is. Adrian is the person who I organized the Go-Go Game Jam with, and these were both posted publicly. But I'm gonna show right here. This is gonna take up most of the screen, and it's gonna cover us, but we can deal with it. You ready for this?
I don't know, you're hiding the mods.
Are you ready for this?
I know exactly what it is.
So let me give you the background first. An individual submitted a game to the Game Jam. Good, thank you, we appreciate it. They wanted to update their game because they found a game crashing bug, and they didn't realize that you weren't allowed to do bug fixes after the Game Jam was over. They thought like, oh yeah, this is just a simple bug fix. Let me just clean this up. Let me delete my game. And let me re-upload it outside of the scope of the jam, which you can't do, right? That's not allowed, because the point of the game jam is to make it within the constraints of a certain time period. Let's go with Adrian's response first. hi, oh yeah, that's the person's name. Whatever. This was posted publicly. This isn't like a bit, a hidden thing. We don't allow game updates, not even for bug fixes, because that counts as more work done on the game, and we want to keep the playfield fair. The game received 6 ratings so far, and the only way to upload it would be remove and add again to the gem, which will clear the ratings in the process. Unfortunately, we have no way of knowing that you will upload the initial version of this game. Listen to that aggressive tone, right? Do you hear how aggressive that tone is? The red highlights are our negative voice, just to clarify. Of course, having no game is not a great option. We've already declined other people's requests to upload games for game crashing bugs. I'll think of a way to if you think of a way, again, now we're putting the ball in his court. Think of a way to prove that you will upload that version, the version without the fix, and I'll see what I can do. There's aggression. There's so much aggression in this, right? This is a very aggressively stated statement. Everything he said is true. I'm not denying for a heartbeat that everything that he said is true and accurate to the rules of the game jam, and technically, he is being fair-handed. Right? You still there?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Here's my response to the same situation. Oh, that's rough. Immediately commiserating with them. We don't let people do bug fixes after the jam ends, but we'll work something out. Do you have a copy of the game as you submitted it? The only way to re-upload it is to remove it, and we can help you re-upload it again. It will clear your ratings, but don't worry too much about a few bugs. It's a game jam, and we know how hard it can be. This will clear your current ratings, though, just so you know. But I think it's the best solution if you have the Git backup of the submission. Also, learn to use Git if you don't use Git. Everybody needs to use Git. Or if you don't have the original anymore, you can zip up what you have and upload it to your own page and link me. I'll still play it on stream to review, but it won't be eligible for any prizes. Aside from that last part about, me adding an extra option, this is the same statement, right? These are the same statements, but one is done negatively, one is done reassuringly, right? We go from, you think of a way to prove that you upload that version, and... too much. And we have no way of knowing that you'll upload the initial version, and opening up with we don't allow, into opening up with commiseration, reassurance, and focusing on we'll work something out. We can take care of this. We'll find a solution for this. Even though this is the same statement, it's a completely different statement, right? And I feel like this is a good example, and Adrian knows that he doesn't have a good public voice, right? Adrian is good at working on the back end, and there's a reason that he doesn't stream, because he doesn't have much of a filter in that sense of, being able to do things politely. but he knows that's something that he's working on it, and that's fair. Some people it was something that requires work. It requires effort, right? Being polite and being kind when moderating is something that does take work. That's not an easy thing.
Hey, the ability to recognize that you need work is already a huge step in the right direction.
I mean, I hit him overhead with a shovel to tell him that. I mean, that counts, right? but I feel like this right here is an example of, how not to do things with being super aggressive and phrasing things in a way that's poor versus phrasing things in a way that's reassuring to the individual.
Phrasing really does make a huge difference.
It does. So that's why I'm saying, use positive voice in moderation. If you're calling somebody out, unless they did something blatantly bad, like posting gore or blatant racism or homo or phobia or transphobia, unless it's something that obviously they had to have known was bad.
Oh yeah, then no mercy. They get the hammer.
Absolutely. But if somebody made a mistake, or if somebody posted something that's outside the tone of the server, an example would be referring to a transgender character in a game as a trap, right? That's considered a slur by a lot of people. Not everybody, and it's been a part of the anime community to say trap as that, in just casually. A lot of people in the anime community just say that and don't think of anything bad about it. But at the end of the day, who are you saying they're trying to trap? What is that? What are the implications of that? And whether or not you want to allow that particular example is entirely on you. That's entirely on you and your community. but that's an example of somebody who isn't saying it with any ill will. There's no ill will. I bring that up because that was a thing that happened on Fiana's stream recently. One of the Niji Sanji VTubers. She didn't handle it terribly well. She was actually going to ban the word from chat, which was, I think, the wrong way of going about it. But she was uncomfortable with people using that word. And she started a huge backlash because that is just a common phrase in the anime community that isn't done with ill intent. But it was still making the streamer feel uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And I love Niji Sanji. I think that they do amazing work, and in general, I love how they handle their talent. I think they messed up with handling on this one. They had her do a public apology for saying that she was uncomfortable about that. I think that was absolutely 100% the wrong thing to do. They made her make a public apology for effectively saying that she was uncomfortable with that phrase, and I think that was a mistake. Regardless, I think that, but the way she handled it was poor. Saying that it was bad, it is. I frankly agree, and I'm not comfortable with it either. But she was going to ban the word. She was going to shame anybody who used the word. Right? And that's the difference. Is the difference between saying, I'm not a fan of this word, I don't feel comfortable with it, chat, could you please not use this? Versus, this is a slur, I don't want you using this. I'm going to ban straight out anybody who says this. I understand where she was coming from. I genuinely do, because I also don't like that phrase, but at the same time, the way she went about it led to heavy backlash.
Educating is very about, especially this type of thing, is very important, but also very difficult, and a lot of people find it a lot easier just to ban.
Yeah. And another example, I'm queer. LGBTQ, I am the Q, I am queer. I feel that that's the best way of describing my identity and my sexuality. That's still a slur in the UK. Calling somebody queer is still a slur in the sense of calling somebody an FAG and is over here. That's still a slur in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
I've been said not to call not that I shouldn't say that word. And it's like, you're going to stand here and tell me not to use the word that I use to identify myself. Then that's a community problem, but it's also a cultural problem, right? That's not their fault, because where they come from, that is a slur. Where I come from, that's what I feel comfortable with, right? So keep in mind when you're talking with people in these, in any sort of community management situation, people come from different backgrounds, and what
honestly, I'd even classify that as a language barrier type of thing.
In a sense, yeah, it could absolutely be considered a language barrier. But you have to consider that when you're talking with people, because they might not mean it in a mean or cruel or dismissive or sexist way, depending on the phrase. That might not be intended with any ill intent, but you need to still manage it carefully. If you just straight up ban somebody who says queer because you grew up in a place where that's a slur, that's not good either. Likewise, if you allow somebody to use another word that is a slur and it starts making people uncomfortable, then that is not good either, right? It's a tough tightrope to cross, and that's part of what this whole stream is supposed to be discussing, is how to handle those situations. And honestly, a lot of the situations have to be talking with the person on a one-on-one basis and working out with the person what is acceptable, right? What is cool and not cool to say to say. Would you agree with him with anything I just said?
That's a lot, but yeah, I totally agree, and it's very difficult with different places, different languages, and honestly, you got even just British English versus American English. Those differences, very easy to have miscommunications. It's already easy enough to have a miscommunication if everyone speaks the same language.
Yeah.
Now you're throwing in extra, language barrier stuff. I mean, people who don't have the same, native language, trying to communicate with their second language that they may not be good at. They may not like understand the language properly, or they may use the wrong word because its direct translation is a normal thing in their language.
Right. But yeah, I use the trap example specifically because that was one that hit me, because I was part of the anime culture for a decade before I was a part of the LGBT, because I was really a part of the LGBT culture. And I was told politely by a mod, hey, don't use that. And that, I guess, in retrospect, I was told fairly impolitely by a moderator, but that was explained, why people take offense to that. I'm like, and my response was, as a reasonable person, oh, okay, I'll adapt and I'll change my language. I didn't realize that was a problem. And now there's the line that people need to cross. If you do come to somebody and say that, and they say
responded that way,
right. But then you come to in situations like queer, where it's like, I do have I don't want to change my language situation, right? That's the flip side of the exact same coin, where I say, I don't want to change my language because this is how I feel comfortable identifying. This is a term that's important to me. This is a phrase that I resonate with. I shouldn't have to change my language for that. You see where this becomes a problem?
Yeah.
Because this is
and also
the same situation.
Even some places where same language, same culture, but like different communities within that culture, will have like reclaimed words, that kind of thing. Words that were originally insults, but now are that use it themselves.
And queer is exactly an example of that one. Yeah, it's a reclaimed insult, but yes, there are differences. There's differences between those two phrases and those two discussions. Trap and queer do have differences. I'm not saying they don't, but the core of it is the same. It's don't use that word, but I want to use that word, and it's a normal word that describes what I'm trying to say. And in one of those situations, I feel justified, and in other of those situations, I don't feel justified. Right? That's a very tricky and a very human situation. It's not an easy one to manage. And
it's also
eventually you'll want to have a manager to help you with this.
And much more difficult to moderate than an in-person community that just like has a chat or something, because of all these differences.
Yeah. I just wanted to mention that because that is a really good example of the difficulty of moderation. And yeah, having covered that, unless you have more you wanted to say, Dirk, I'm ready to open up to just questions, Q&A.
And I guess just kind of on that topic, it's very difficult sometimes to determine like punishments for that type of thing. Because like, if somebody's like, oh, that word's a slur, and then someone else is like, no, this is just a regular word, this is what we use, this is, this is part of my language, that's like, what do you do in that situation? Like, do you make them stop? Do you let them continue? Do
you manage it on a case-by-case basis? And if you do, at what point can you not do that anymore? At what point do you reach a capacity level where you can't manage that on a case-by-case basis, right?
Yeah. Especially with bigger servers, it's difficult.
And that, actually, there's one more thing I wanted to talk about, and that is dovetailed into that as the answer, because I'm not just going to leave that, hanging without actually giving an answer. One very good answer is that once you have a server with a community, once you have a chat room with a community, once you have a forum with a community, the community will self-police. I should have brought this up before, because there are several points where it would have been relevant. But the community will self-police, and the mods may not need to intervene, right? Especially for things like what we just described, where it's like, hey, buddy, just so you know, a mod might never need to show their face and for the community to say, hey, that's not cool.
But then that can also lead to mini-modding.
It can, which can be an issue. Mini-modding can be an issue, but where backseat modding is what I like to call it. But that is a concern when the backseater thinks they know the rules better than the moderators, which is We had that issue recently. And that, I don't have an answer for that on scale, right?
Yeah.
In a small server, then you talk to the person. In a smaller community, like under 3,000, 4,000 individuals on the server, you can talk to that person and say, hey, don't backseat mod. That just notify a mod and then back down. Don't try to stand up on our behalf. If it's something that like that, but still assume that people will read the room in other situations. But at scale, I don't know how to do that on a 10,000 person server, right?
Mm-hmm. It can be difficult.
Yeah, you just I think honestly a ticket system might just be the best answer for that. It's like, just send the message of saying, hey, open a ticket, don't mod this yourself. That might just be the answer for it.
Honestly, so far, on like a larger server, like 10,000 people on the Wholesome Memes, we've definitely had our fair share of dealing with people who were mini-modding, and so far it's been few enough that we are still able to just go in and be like, hey, don't do this, like let the mods handle that kind of thing. And then there's sometimes when it can be helpful where, like you said, someone's just like, hey, by the way, this can be seen as offensive or this can be seen as bad.
Yeah. Should we open up to questions, Q&A?
Sure.
How you doing, chat? Have we filled your brain with all the information that you would never like to hear?
Yeah, and that's what Sapphire just said. There's a difference between calling someone out for doing something wrong and alerting a mod to something that's been done wrong on the server.
Yeah.
That's a big thing where the ticket system or DMing a mod or that kind of thing comes in as opposed to just calling it out in the chat.
Community policing is good for content stuff. Somebody posts for example, a meme that's a bit too risque, the chat has like a exposed butt or something, then community might say, hey, just so you know, we don't like that kind of stuff here. But there's a difference between, hey, just so you know, that's a bit much for memes channel, and hey, you can't post that here, that's not allowed. It comes down to a tone. It comes up down to a tone and a positive negative voice issue, and that's where, for me at least, that's part of where that threshold line is, right?
Yeah.
The line is between when it's done as supportively, I guess, versus done as a command.
Tone is very important.
Yeah, I think honestly, just replace this whole video with a 5-minute clip that says tone is important on repeat. That's really just this entire stream, isn't it?
Pretty much. Tone is important.
It is, but it's difficult, especially for neurodivergent people, to read tone online, right?
Definitely.
That is genuinely a concern, especially for neurodivergent people to be able to read tone. And
it can definitely be difficult sometimes.
I'm going to say something that I hate to say. I'm going to say something harsh, alright?
Uh-oh.
The majority of the people that we have had to ban were neurodivergent. I hate to say it, but it's true. The majority of the people that we've ended up banning were people who were self-described, at least, as neurodivergent in some way, who couldn't read the room and couldn't understand the rules, or were going out of their way to ignore them, or having some other concern. I'm not saying it's a red flag, but I am saying that is more difficult to read a room, more difficult to understand how a server is running if you have a neurodivergency, and that can lead to more concerns. Again, I'm not.
Although it is definitely a red flag if it's they're using it as an excuse for something, especially if it's something major.
That's true. Yeah. yes, I have just had some water, as I see now.
I'm gonna have water too.
Good idea. There you go. But yeah, like it's not that it's a red flag, because I have had more neurodivergent people who are super cool than I have had who have been a problem. Well, at the same time, there are that can be an indicator that somebody might not be able to mesh as well with your community as you might hope, right? And you want to be polite, and you want to be you want to be more polite and civil if that's the case, because many times that is going to be an innocent mistake. That's going to be a "oh, sorry," and many times they'll be cool with that. Many times they will just be like, "Oh, okay, cool, my bad," and learn from it. Especially if they're a little bit older. Especially if they're older than than I'll say 15 or so, maybe 20 or so. That's where people are going to be are going to have enough lived experience to know that, like, oh, okay, I understand that that's what you're saying, even if they have that sort of some sort of neurodivergency. Whereas if they are younger, they might become indignant, right? They might be you run the risk of them becoming self-righteous about it.
Yeah. So, do you have more, or I see we have a question in the chat now.
What do you do when you have too much patience and empathy that you begin excusing people's behavior? In my opinion, that's why you need multiple mods, right? If one, you need to have a hard voice in your mod. Like, okay, we never actually mentioned this because I just had made an assumption. You need to have a mod chat. You need to have a separate, either a separate
100%.
chat room for the mods, or a separate forum section for mods only. And you need a diversity of mods. Just like we said before, you need to have a diversity of timelines of people who are able to moderate at different hours. You need to have a difference of tones. You want to have moderators that are soft. You want to have the teddy bear mod that wants to save everybody, right? You want to have the mod that has a recurring problem of relationships because they think they can fix people. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm not sorry though. But you also need to have the mod in there that says just ban him. You need to have that voice in your mod chat that says get him out of here, right? And
this has definitely been a big problem in a few servers I'm in.
Too many teddy bears, or too many
too many teddy bears, actually.
Yeah.
I've had way more problems with too many teddy bears than too many like aggressive.
Yeah.
But like there've definitely been quite a few times, especially there's this one server where the mods were picked based on like, oh, this is a good person, this is a nice person, I want to make them a mod. Which then created the too many teddy bears problem. Right. And there have been so many times where, like, there's been people who just like done like 3 or 4 bannable offenses, and I'm just like, hey, like they're gonna just keep doing this if we don't punish them. At least like mute them and tell them not to. Like,
yeah, and on that point, being nice should not be a prerequisite for being a mod. Neither should being a hard ass, right? Like, both of these things are true, right? A situation where all the mods are teddy bears can lead to people who are being too flexible with the rules, and a situation where you have too many people who are extra vigilant about moderation can lead to an oppressive atmosphere, right?
Yeah, you definitely need that balance.
That doesn't mean, and I've been in places that have worked with both, right? I have been in modern Discord servers where every single mod is a teddy bear, and it works because of the self-regulation of the community. And I've been a member of something awful since the early 2000s, where every mod is a tightwad. But like, this is those can work. But if you are watching the stream because you have a game, or you have a VTuber, or you have some small group of people you want to moderate, then you need to hear me say that you need both, right? You
Mhm.
can have teddy bear mods and you can have, hard mods. But if you are here because you're questioning what kind of mods you need to have, then you need both, period.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Like, I'm definitely, like, you talk to me, you probably get the impression I'm more on the teddy bear side. But I will ban you. I'm like,
Yeah.
and just think about, like,
Honestly,
a
you are
very
a balanced
large
mod.
portion. Yeah, I
Honestly,
mean, think about, like...
yeah, you are a balanced mod. And, like, in our chat right now, like, just looking over, we have Bill, Jack, and Tori as the, as the harder mods who are willing to crack their knuckles and say, let's go. And then we have, Blue Elf, Safi, and me, who are going to be the teddy bears. And then we have, you and Luna and Hensha, and not that Hensha is really active in moderation stuff, but who are more of that balance, more of the balance mod. And because we have such a good diversity of moderation, I think is part of why things work so
Very
well.
effective.
We have people where if they come in and say something, you listen, right? If Tori or Jack Shadows kicks down the door and says, "Hey," then the chat will go, "I," right? Like the chat will shut up real quick. But if it's me or Safi, I've made the joke before that I'm barely a moderator on my own server, right? There are people who will not show who will not show them the respect, even though my name's on the server, because they're the teddy bear mod, right? And that's that, which is good in some situations because it means that some conflicts can be resolved easier. Again, this calls back towards visibility as well. I think the best answer to visibility is to have a couple of people in the tactical vests and to have a couple of plainclothes, right? Have some of both.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that a diversity of a moderation staff is very important.
I certainly like to be the teddy bear, but when it comes down to it,
Until you
I
need
mean,
to
just
not be.
look at just look at who we've had problems with. I'm oftentimes probably one of the first who's just like, all right, just get rid of this guy. Like, just ban him.
Yeah.
And after, doing this for a long time, I mean, like any skill, the more you do it, the better you get at it. And, like, I'm very good at just picking out, like, oh, yeah, this guy's bad news,
Vibe check.
Yeah, vibe check. Alright,
yeah.
I'm checking everyone's vibes.
And your harder mods, your tighter mods, should know dog whistles. I mean, I touched on this before, but you should know the dog whistles for the alt-right. Right? There's no way of candy coating this. You need to know if somebody is, has a right-wing, a Nazi or some other type of avatar that might not be known as well. I mean, and you need to be able to suss that out quickly, right?
Yeah.
Like, you need to be able to find, like, a lot of people don't recognize, what was it?
Actually, a big thing is, a lot of times if someone comes in with a profile picture that's some major political figure, especially if it's like, like you said earlier, like Axis powers or something.
Yeah.
Huge red flag.
And, like, you need to find this, but keep in mind that it's not going to be perfect. Like, the Associated Press missed a black sun on a post that was praising a recent political event. That is a very, very bad symbol to see, but it's also one that doesn't look bad unless you realize it, right? That's
Yep.
something that is if you see that, you should ban on site. That's as bad as the more well-known one. But most people won't recognize it, and many moderators might let it slide. Look up Black Sun symbol on Wikipedia. You'll see it, and you will recognize. If you know it, you know it, right? But at the same time, like again, AP missed it on somebody's uniform. On somebody's, like, they had added a patch to their uniform with the Black Sun on it, and it's like, my dude, my brother, you shouldn't have missed that.
Especially when it's your job to not miss these kinds of things.
Right, exactly. But what I'm saying is, if you do miss it, you might not be in bad company, right? Like that's
It is very easy to miss things like that, though.
It can be easy to miss,
know.
but your harder mods, especially the ones who are going to be more of the ban on site, on infringements, need to be able to recognize these symbols, right? If somebody types, if somebody types 4 numbers in chat, that can be a high five or an instant ban depending on which 4 numbers they type. And I am going to assume that everybody in chat knows both of those numbers, and I'm not going to mention what I'm referring to. But one of them is a high five and one of them is an instant ban. Right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh no, not the OSHA violation.
Okay, yeah, that's a second high five one from me, Sapphire. Yeah, that is another high five one. Okay.
You can't ban Sapphire. It's not possible.
$1984. Okay, apparently
there's another number.
Maybe I just need to say this. I think what? Maybe it would just do well. Do well to say it. 1488. That is a dog whistle. That is a literal Nazi propaganda. Yeah, that number 1488 is Nazi propaganda. Look it up. Know it. If you are moderating a server, know why. And I was joking about the other one being. I was thinking 1312. The all cops are bad. That was more. I was saying that tongue in cheek is getting a high five, because people who have that sort of mentality usually, not always, are more fine but need to be kept an eye on, right? If somebody's is in, yeah, if that one is in someone's handle, instant ban, exactly. But yeah, if 1312 is one of those things where it's like, haha, I'm gonna keep an eye on you just in case you get weird or political, but that's probably gonna be cool. That's probably gonna be okay. But okay. But on the other side, on the other side, it's no, out now. That is going to cause a problem. Period. That will never not cause a problem.
Alright, I'm just picturing what Bill said. If it's like on Discord, how it has the 4 numbers, like the tag you choose, and then the 4 random numbers. If you just happen to be stuck with that, I wonder if they have any secretly have anything back end where it just prevents it from automatically picking numbers like that.
Honestly, I suspect that they do, but I have a funny story about that. Oh my goodness, I have a funny story about that.
All right, let's hear it.
Oh no. Oh, this is the bad story, but it's real funny.
Oh no.
This is actually a story about procedural generation. In XCOM, and I think about a couple people flinch because they know the story. In XCOM, it procedurally generates all the mission names. All the mission titles are proc-gen. They from a dictionary, and they filter out some of the obvious bad ones, but they missed a couple. And one of the randomly generated quest names that came up, and people posted it, and people what like Operation Apple speaker, or Operation nail, cog, or like they're just dictionary stuff that they just throw out there. And someone got Operation Crystal Knight.
No.
Okay. If you don't know what that is, look it up. But that came up completely randomly on a procedural generation list, and it's like, oh no.
Very, very much oh no.
They pushed a patch out that within a couple days, and I don't know if you're familiar with Firaxis. They don't patch in a time span of just a couple days. Firaxis doesn't patch within that time span. That's not how the company works. But they push out a patch within a week to stop that from being a possible selection.
Yep. Do not want that.
Oh no. I love Firaxis, but they are very slow and calculated when it comes to patching almost all the time, which is great. I will speak volumes of wonderful things about Firaxis games. That is honestly one of my favorite publishers from like on the whole of like the studio perspective. So yeah, they acted quick. They acted quick and took that out like real quick. And not just for PR reasons, right? That I just want to, like, there is a difference. Carl, oh no, I googled it. Yeah. So, but yeah, that same sort of thing with like that was proc gen. That was just a procedural generation that went sideways, right?
Yep. You do not want that.
Derek,
it's very hard to predict.
The base of your horn has one spot that's a different shade of green that got green screened out, and I've been looking at it the entire stream. I've tried my best not to mention it. I've been doing everything I can not to point it out, but there's a little spot at the base of your horn that must be the same color as my green screen, and I'm sorry. I've been staring at it and trying not to mention it the entire stream. I broke. It's too much now. I can't not see it. It's just there. It's been there the whole time. I'm so sad. I'm so sorry. Okay, I'm fine. No. I'm okay. But okay.
Imagine if the base color happened to be the same color as the green screen.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I've had that happen. Do you know who I've had that happen with?
Who?
Little Appleseed.
Oh no.
I love her. She's a delight. She's a fantastic person, and I've only collabed with her a couple times, but every single time I've collabed with her has been just a great experience. But setting up her green screen is just a exercise in futility, frankly.
That's why lots of times in like movies and stuff, they actually use I think they use a blue screen.
It depends on what the actors are wearing. That really comes down to costume design. You can do blue screen. Green screen is still the most common because it chroma keys super easily. But I've actually seen a red screen before. I've actually seen a 255 red screen. That is usually avoided because that will color tint the actor's skin. Yeah. In a way that usually looks ill, but depending on what the actors are wearing, I have had one situation where I saw a red screen in use, and it's like apparently it was a nightmare to work with in post production, but it was still.
I can tell.
But it was either that or spend the man hours to rotoscope, and you just don't do that anymore, right? How?
Yeah,
it would be
that's way too much.
It would be brutal to hire somebody to rotoscope in the year of our Lord 2022, right? Like, I'm certain that you could find someone. I'm certain that you could find a skilled rotoscoper who's been out of work for the past 15 years, but like. That's just something that that is not really. That's a skill set that most people don't have anymore, right? And yeah, so it was like, okay, we'll get a red screen. It's like, why would you? I'm just here for stunt work.
Like, all right, but just don't blame me when this goes south.
Exactly. Although I'm glad you said that, because that's actually something that I have also been cutting from my vocabulary. That we were talking before about words that have connotations, right? About in some regions. I'm not calling you out. It's a fine term. I've actually never been called out for it. I have learned that things going south is actually, you know, a reference to the dominance of the global north. Of things going south, meaning things being closer to they are in the global south, i.e. worse. Things going south is a reference to things getting worse, like it is in sub-Saharan Africa and South America. And it's like, oh, I don't like that phrase anymore. And
that's something to remove from my vocabulary now.
And it's not like a problem. It's not. I've never heard anybody complain about it. I've never heard anybody complain about it. But at the same time,
because most people don't know what it means.
Right. And once I learned that, it's like, I'm gonna quietly start saying things have gone sideways instead, because it means the same thing. It's still recognized as meaning the same thing, but it doesn't have that connotation.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. But so that's actually,
it makes you wonder how many phrases like that there are out there that you just don't know about.
Somebody complained. I saw somebody complain in a public server. It was actually a Surus, if you're familiar with Surus. Great guy. Go check him out on Twitch. Surus, on his server, somebody said moron. And someone actually got up in arms over that, because that does have bad connotations. But it's not meant that way anymore. Language evolves, and calling somebody a moron no longer means that they have an inferior genetic structure, or that they would be bad stock for I forget the name of it. Starts with an E, but it's the bad thing. But it no longer means that. It just means they're dumb. In the same way that dumb is no longer ableist, dumb doesn't mean mute, right? Dumb doesn't really mean mute in modern society connotations. It doesn't mean that so that you can't speak. It means that you are, you all know what it means. And yeah, that's fair, Bill. That's saying that you don't use those anymore because they don't describe the thing I want to mean. That's reasonable. That's completely reasonable. But at the same time, language evolves, right? If you say moron, that mean the thing that it used to mean. If you say dumb, it doesn't have an ableist meaning anymore, right? If you say things have gone south, it doesn't actually have a colonialist meaning anymore. But it's not a bad idea to consider what the history of it. But then again, look at Vandal, right? Vandal is a slur towards the Vandal people of of Germany, somewhere in Germany. I want to say they're Germanic. What were the Vandals? Hold on, that's gonna bug me. Oh, that's another thing that's gonna bug me. The Vandal people were they were Germanic. It is a slur towards that, and they do still have an ableist message, just not in the same way. Sure, that's fair. But like Sinister. Sinister is an ableist slur against left-handed people, who are considered to be morally inferior to right-handed people.
Really?
Yes, the word sinister means left-handed. It doesn't mean that anymore, and we don't need to police that, right? We don't need to police the word sinister, because language changes and evolves over time. It doesn't mean that anymore, so we don't need to police what it once meant. But there are some things, like GYP, which still very much do mean things to the Romani people, right? Right? So
recently there's this moth that got renamed because of that.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah. But
so it's been a huge problem up in certain areas. They just completely destroy all the trees.
Oh, I got you. I see where it's coming from now. So, like, it's good to be cognizant of that. That doesn't mean that you need to moderate it or ban on site, or it doesn't even mean that you need to change your language necessarily. But it can be worth being conscious of, right? And if someone takes offense to it, you have to make a decision based on your community and based on the culture of your community, whether that's something that's worth moderating or not, right? In this case, it's like, no, they didn't mean no. Nobody recognizes moron to mean what it historically has meant. That's not a reasonable use of that of moderation. Well, at the same time, being conscious of that, and maybe you want to be like Bill Guasarme and cut that from your dialogue anyways and replace it with ignorant or some variation thereof, because it's it's still not necessarily good to use. It's still something to be conscious of, but it's not necessarily from a community management standpoint. Not necessarily. And there might be things, and there are things that blur that line, right? There are things where it's like, is that okay to say, or is that not okay to say? This goes back again to what we were saying before between queer and trap.
Yep.
This is just this is the same thing, just on a different timeline, I guess, really, because I think you can almost say
as well as going back to people asking like, potentially loaded questions like, "Oh, this is a bad thing to say." But then sometimes they genuinely mean it like this.
See, callbacks are good. This is why we have a quality stream here on Jade the Kobold on channels. We have quality callbacks and references to the rest of the stream. See, it's like poetry. It's like poetry. It all rhymes.
Yep, and you should definitely like and subscribe.
Do it. If you've put up with me for this long of the stream, I think I earned a like. I think that's
come on.
fair.
We're how long are we?
We're at the 3
almost
hour
3
mark.
hours in.
And I think we're pretty much ready to wrap up unless there's any more audience questions.
If you're still watching, then you definitely like Jade enough that you should definitely subscribe.
If you're still watching, cool. I know people fall asleep to my streams. I honestly take it as a compliment, but I'm not gonna sit here and pretend that people don't.
So true. I'm a big offender of that. I lots of times I'll put it on as like in the background while I'm like doing work or something, and like playing a game or something like that.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
All the time.
That's, again, YouTube versus Twitch, right? That's perfectly reasonable and fine on YouTube, whereas on Twitch I would be considered terrible. I've extracted a like from chat. Yeah, I've just in that past couple seconds, I've gotten more likes than than YouTube claims that I have concurrent viewers. Like, well,
How many likes did you just get?
Huh? I just jumped up to 13 likes, and we were at what, 6 or 5 or 6 before, and it says that I have.
My screen has been my screen said 7 concurrent viewers the entire time, pretty much.
Yeah, so it's something that I'm genuinely struggling with. Honestly, I always have been. It's like I know
YouTube moment.
I probably have 20 people watching now. I probably have 20 concurrents, but like I'm still staring at the number 7. Like. I mean, I know 7. I have 36 views on the video, and an average watch time of half an hour, which is the math. The math doesn't check out with what just happened.
What
Anyways,
is the numbers? What do they mean?
Yeah, what are even our numbers anymore? Okay, I've gotten back to complaining about YouTube. I think that means it's time to end the stream, right? Put in chat something that needs to be moderated. No, don't do that. I'm sorry. No, I didn't know. Okay. Put.
I think you should definitely put a lot of things in the chat. Just put everything in chat.
Leave a comment that needs to be deleted. No. Leave a comment about I don't know. What are we doing here?
Just leave a comment about anything. It could be complete gibberish. Just leave a comment.
Yeah. Honestly, what I would request is people to have a conversation in comments. What would warm my heart more than just about anything else would be people going into the comment section and talking with each other. Like, leave a comment and then read the other comments and respond to somebody else.
Do it.
Leave a comment about the stream and then read another comment about somebody else. I sometimes think that I've had that. If my comment section was as active as my Discord, I would be pushing 30,000 subscribers right now because of the algorithm.
Algorithm.
if my comment section was a fraction as active as my Discord server, I would be in the tens of thousands easily, just because that would mean that YouTube would be promoting my video more often. So yeah, toss down something that you learned today. I think that's a great one. Toss down something that you learned today, and then respond to somebody else who made a comment about that.
All right, we're deleting the Discord, and now we're just having everything be in the comment section.
There's actually a strong argument that would be a good idea. I'm not going to. I love my Discord. It's everything to me. But there's a strong argument that wouldn't be a bad idea. Sorry,
Oh no. Oh no. We're giving that lizard brain some ideas.
No, I've thought about that in when I've had my Pagliacci moments, you know. But like, no, the Discord is incredible and I love it. But yeah, that's what I say for today. Is leave a comment, then respond to somebody else's comment. Thank you all for joining today. I hope you had a good time. I did. I hope you learned something, and I hope that something that I said was valuable to you. But yeah, toss out something you learned today, and not hopefully it wasn't something that needs to be moderated. Use careful wording if you learned something about the XCOM thing.
Yep.
All right, I think we're done here. I think we've covered everything that we're going to cover today. Thank you, everybody who joined.
I think it's a pretty informative stream.
Honestly, yeah. All right, cheers, friends.